The acrid smell of whiskey and tobacco smoke hung thick in the air of the Silver Dollar Saloon. Clara May Whitlow stood frozen in the doorway, her worn calico dress still damp from the evening rain. Her Uncle Silas's iron grip on her arm was the only thing keeping her from bolting back into the muddy streets of Elkhorn Ridge. "Come on now, girl," Silas slurred, dragging her toward the bar where a group of gold prospectors sat hunched over their drinks. "Time you started earning your keep." Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd known this day would come. For 5 years, since the fire that took her parents, she'd lived under her uncle's roof, enduring his drunken rages and cruel words. But this was something else entirely. The prospectors looked up as Silas approached, their eyes glinting with interest in the lamplight. They were rough men, their clothes stained with dirt and their faces weathered by years of searching for fortune in the Nevada hills. "Gentlemen," Silas announced, swaying slightly, "I got a proposition for you." Clara tried to pull away, but his fingers only dug deeper into her arm. Around them, the saloon continued its nightly revelry cards slapping on tables, coins clinking, men laughing. No one seemed to notice or care about the young woman's distress. "This here's my niece," Silas continued, pushing Clara forward. 20 years old, knows how to cook, clean, and keep her mouth shut, strong as an ox despite her size. She'd make a fine addition to any man's household. The largest of the prospectors, a man with a grizzled beard and small, mean eyes, leaned back in his chair. "What are you asking for her, old man?" Clara's stomach turned. She was being bargained over like livestock at market. Her mother would have wept to see this moment. Her father would have fought to his last breath to prevent it. "Well now," Silas rubbed his stubbled chin. "Seeing as how I raised her these past 5 years, fed her, kept a roof over her head, I'd say she's worth at least—" He paused, his bloodshot eyes scanning the bottles behind the bar. "A full bottle of that Kentucky bourbon. The good stuff, mind you." The prospectors exchanged glances and chuckled. The bearded one stood up, towering over both Silas and Clara. "A bottle of bourbon for a woman, that's your price." "Times are hard," Silas shrugged. "A man's gotta wet his whistle." Clara found her voice at last. "Uncle, please." Silas backhanded her across the face. Not hard enough to knock her down, but enough to silence her. "You speak when you're spoken to, girl." The prospector reached for his money pouch. "All right then, 1 bottle of bourbon for—" "Not while I live." The words cut through the saloon's din like a blade through silk. Every head turned toward the corner where a lone figure sat at a table, his hat tilted low over his face. He'd been so quiet that Clara hadn't even noticed him when they'd entered. The man stood slowly, unfolding his tall frame with deliberate calm. As he lifted his head, Clara saw a face that was neither young nor old, perhaps 35 years, weathered by sun and wind, but not unkind. His eyes were gray as winter steel, and they were fixed on Silas with an intensity that made her uncle take an involuntary step back. "This ain't none of your concern, stranger," the bearded prospector growled. The cowboy, for that's what he was. Clara could tell by his worn leather chaps and the way he moved with the easy grace of a man who spent his days in the saddle walked toward them. His spurs clinked softly with each step. "I'm making it my concern," he said quietly. His voice was low, measured, carrying the kind of authority that didn't need volume to command attention. Silas puffed up his chest. "Now see here, mister, this is family business. The girl's mine to do with as I please. I raised her. I fed her." "You're trying to sell her for liquor," the cowboy interrupted. "That makes you less than a man in my book." The saloon had gone completely silent now. Even the piano player had stopped his tinkling melody. The tension crackled like lightning before a storm. "Who the hell are you?" Silas demanded. "Name's Levi Carter. I run cattle up near Sagebrush Creek." He moved closer, positioning himself between Clara and the prospectors. And I'll say it once more, this transaction isn't happening. Not while I draw breath. The bearded prospector's hand drifted toward his hip. You looking for trouble, cowboy? Levi's own hand moved imperceptibly closer to the Colt on his hip, though he didn't draw. No, sir, I'm looking to prevent it. The lady's coming with me. Anyone who's got a problem with that can take it up with me outside. For a long moment, no one moved. Clara held her breath, her cheek still stinging from her uncle's blow. She didn't know this man, this Levi Carter, but something in his stance, in the quiet certainty of his words, made her want to trust him. The prospector apparently decided a woman wasn't worth a gunfight. He sat back down with a grunt. Hell, keep her then. Probably more trouble than she's worth anyway. Levi nodded once, then turned to Clara. Up close. She could see the lines around his eyes, the kind that came from squinting into the sun. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. Ma'am, he said quietly, would you come with me, please? Clara glanced at her uncle, who was red-faced with rage and humiliation. She thought of the 5 years of misery, of sleeping in the cold root cellar, of going hungry so he could buy whiskey. She thought of her parents and the life they'd wanted for her. Yes, she whispered. Then, louder, yes, I'll come. Levi offered her his arm, a gesture so unexpectedly gentlemanly in this rough place that it nearly brought tears to her eyes. She took it, her fingers trembling slightly against his sleeve. You can't just take her, Silas sputtered. She's my blood, my responsibility. Levi paused at the door, looking back over his shoulder. A man who'd trade his kin for whiskey has no claim to blood or responsibility. If you come near her again, we'll have more than words between us. With that, he led Clara out into the cool Nevada night. The rain had stopped, leaving the air clean and sharp. Stars began to peek through the breaking clouds. Thank you, Clara managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Levi released her arm once they were away from the saloon. No need for thanks. Ma'am, some things just aren't right, and a man's got to stand up when he sees them. But you don't even know me. Why would you? I know enough, he said simply. I know you deserve better than being bartered away for drinking money. Everyone does. They walked in silence for a moment before Levi spoke again. There's a boarding house 2 streets over, Mrs. Hester runs it. She's a good woman, a widow. She'll take you in for the night, no questions asked. I'll cover the cost. I can't accept. You can and you will, he said firmly, but not unkindly. Tomorrow, if you're willing, you can come out to my camp. We're in need of a cook for the next few weeks while we move the herd to winter pasture. It's honest work for honest pay. After that, you'll have enough money to go wherever you please. Do whatever you want. Clara stopped walking, studying this strange man who'd appeared like something out of her mother's old storybooks. Why are you doing this? Levi was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the distant mountains. Maybe because I had a sister once. Maybe because I know what it's like to have no one stand up for you when you need it most. Or maybe just because it's the right thing to do. He turned to face her. Does the reason matter? Clara thought about it, then shook her head. No, I suppose it doesn't. They resumed walking. And soon the boarding house came into view, a neat 2-story building with lamplight glowing warmly in the windows. It looked like safety. It looked like hope. Mr. Carter, Clara said as they approached the door. Levi, he corrected. Just Levi. Levi, she repeated, tasting the simple honesty of the name. I don't know how to thank you. You've saved me from nothing that should have been happening in the first place, he finished. You don't owe me anything, Miss Whitlow. Clara May Whitlow. Miss Whitlow. He touched the brim of his hat. You get some rest now. If you decide to take me up on that job offer, I'll be by in the morning. If not, well, I wish you the best of luck wherever your road leads. He started to turn away, but Clara caught his sleeve. I'll take it. The job. I'm a good cook. I promise. I won't let you down. For the first time since she'd seen him, Levi smiled. It was just a slight upturn of his lips, but it transformed his stern features. "I don't doubt that, Miss Whitlow. Not for a minute." He walked her to the door and knocked. When Mrs. Hester appeared, a plump, motherly woman with graying hair. Levi explained the situation in low tones and pressed money into her hands. The widow took one look at Clara's face and immediately ushered her inside. "You come right in, dear. We'll get you settled. Thank you, Mr. Carter. I'll take good care of her." As the door closed, Clara looked back one last time to see Levi walking away into the darkness, his figure tall and straight against the starlit sky. For the first time in 5 years, she felt something she'd almost forgotten existed. Hope. The morning sun painted the Nevada sky in shades of rose and gold as Clara stood on Mrs. Hester's porch, her few belongings wrapped in a worn cloth bundle. She'd barely slept, her mind churning between gratitude and apprehension. What kind of man was Levi Carter? Really, what would he expect in return for his kindness? Mrs. Hester had been a godsend, providing not just a clean bed, but also a simple meal and a listening ear. "That Levi Carter's a good man," the widow had assured her over morning coffee. "Quiet as a church mouse, but honest as the day is long. His men respect him, and that says something in these parts." The sound of approaching hoofbeats made Clara's heart skip. Levi appeared, leading a gentle-looking mare alongside his own mount. He touched his hat brim in greeting. "Morning, Miss Whitlow, Mrs. Hester." His eyes quickly assessed Clara, as if checking that she was truly all right. "You still willing to take that job?" "Yes," Clara said firmly. "More than willing." "Mrs." Hester pressed a small package into Clara's hands. "Some biscuits for your journey. Dear, you take care now." Levi dismounted and helped Clara onto the mare with a careful, respectful touch. "Her name's Buttercup. She's gentle as a lamb. Can you ride?" "A little," Clara admitted. "My father taught me. Before—" She stopped, swallowing hard. "That's fine," Levi said, understanding without needing explanation. "We'll take it slow." They rode out of Elkhorn Ridge as the town was just beginning to wake. Clara couldn't help but glance back once, wondering if her uncle was sleeping off his drink or already planning some scheme to get her back. Levi seemed to sense her worry. "He won't follow," he said quietly. "Men like that are cowards at heart. They only prey on those they think can't fight back." The journey to Sagebrush Creek took them through country that grew more beautiful with each mile. The flat, dusty plains gave way to rolling hills dotted with juniper and sage. The air was crisp and clean, scented with wild herbs and morning dew. "How long have you been running cattle?" Clara asked, finding courage in the peaceful surroundings. "About 10 years. Started as a hand myself. Worked my way up. The owner, Mr. Jacobson. He lives back east now. Trusts me to run things." Levi's voice carried a note of quiet pride. They talked sporadically as they rode, Levi pointing out landmarks and Clara gradually relaxing in the saddle. He was unlike any man she'd known, neither rough like the miners and cowboys who frequented her uncle's haunts, nor falsely refined like the merchants who'd tried to court her before her parents died. He was simply solid, real. As the sun climbed higher, they crested a hill and Clara gasped. Below stretched a valley with a clear creek winding through it like a silver ribbon. A cluster of canvas tents and a chuck wagon marked the camp, with hundreds of cattle grazing peacefully in the distance. "Welcome to our outfit," Levi said. As they descended, men began emerging from the camp. Clara counted 8 of them, all watching with curious but not unfriendly eyes. Her nervousness returned in a rush. Levi dismounted and helped her down. "Boys, this is Miss Clara Whitlow. She'll be taking over cooking duties for the next few weeks. I expect you all to treat her with respect and mind your manners." A grizzled older man with kind eyes stepped forward. "Name's Samuel Johnson. Miss Cookie to this bunch of saddle tramps. I'll be glad for the help. My back ain't what it used to be." one by one. The others introduced themselves: Tom, barely 18 with a shy smile; the Baxter brothers, James and Robert, who looked enough alike to be twins; Miguel, whose musical accent spoke of origins far to the south; Frank, built like a bear but with gentle manners; and two others whose names Clara tried hard to remember. "Where should I—" Clara began uncertainly. Cookie gestured to the chuck wagon. "Got a tent set up for you right behind here. Miss Private and Proper. Levi made sure of that last night after he got back." Clara glanced at Levi, surprised. He'd ridden back here in the dark to prepare for her arrival. "I'll leave you to get settled," Levi said. "Cookie'll show you where everything is. We usually eat at sunrise, noon, and sunset. Nothing fancy needed. These boys are grateful for anything that's hot and filling." The men dispersed to their duties, and Cookie began showing Clara around the camp kitchen. Everything was organized but basic cast-iron pots and skillets, sacks of flour and beans, slabs of salted beef, barrels of water. "Levi runs a tight outfit," Cookie explained. "No drinking in camp, no gambling that gets out of hand, and definitely no bothering the women folk, though you're the first woman we've had here. He's fair, but cross him and you'll find yourself looking for work elsewhere." Clara spent the morning familiarizing herself with the supplies and planning meals. Cookie stayed close, offering advice and stories. She learned that several of the men couldn't read or write, that Miguel sent most of his pay to his family in California, that young Tom was saving to buy his own small ranch. When noon approached, she had her first real test. Working over the campfire was different from her uncle's kitchen, but she managed to produce a hearty stew with the biscuits Mrs. Hester had taught her to make. The men lined up with their plates, polite but clearly skeptical. The first bite changed everything. Frank's eyes widened. "Miss Clara, this is really good." A chorus of agreement rose from the others. Even Levi, who'd held back until his men were served, allowed a small smile as he tasted the stew. "Thank you, Miss Whitlow," he said simply, but the approval in his eyes warmed her more than any flowery compliment could have. The afternoon passed quickly. Clara cleaned up with Cookie's help, then began preparing for the evening meal. She found herself humming as she worked something she hadn't done in years. The men came and went about their duties, always tipping their hats when they passed. As the sun began to sink, Tom approached hesitantly. "Miss Clara, I was wondering, that is, if it wouldn't be too much trouble, could you maybe help me with something?" "What is it, Tom?" He pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. "It's a letter from my ma. I can make out some words, but—" He flushed red. "I ain't had much schooling." Clara's heart went out to the boy. "Of course I'll help. Bring it over to the light." Soon she was reading the letter aloud, Tom hanging on every word about his siblings and the family farm. When she finished, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Thank you, Miss. I'll try to write her back tonight. I could help with that too, if you'd like," Clara offered. Tom's face lit up. "Would you? That'd be real fine." After supper, beef and beans that the men declared the best they'd ever tasted, Clara helped Tom compose his reply by lantern light. Word spread, and soon James Baxter was shyly asking if she might read a letter from his sweetheart. "Now don't go pestering Miss Clara," Levi warned, appearing from the darkness. "She's here to cook, not be the camp secretary." "I don't mind," Clara said quickly. "Truly, it's nice to be helpful." Levi studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Just don't let them take advantage. These boys can be like puppies when they see kindness." As the camp settled for the night, Clara sat by the dying fire with Cookie, who was showing her how to prepare sourdough starter for tomorrow's biscuits. The old man had become her fast friend and protector. "Haven't seen the boys this happy in months," Cookie mused. "A woman's touch makes a difference, civilizes things." "They're good men," Clara said, meaning it. "They are, and Levi's the best of them. Lost his whole family to cholera when he wasn't much older than Tom. Built himself up from nothing. Never seen him do a dishonest thing or turn his back on someone in need. Clara absorbed this information, adding it to her growing picture of the man who'd saved her. She was about to ask more when Levi himself approached. "Everything's settling all right. Miss Whitlow." "Yes, thank you. The men have been very kind." He crouched by the fire, poking at the embers with a stick. "I wanted to say what you did for Tom. Reading his letter, that was good of you. Boy's sensitive about not having his letters." "Everyone deserves to hear from their family," Clara said softly. Levi glanced at her, something unreadable in his gray eyes. "Yes, they do." He stood. "Well, I'll bid you good night. We start moving the herd tomorrow, so it'll be a busy day." Mr. Carter Levi," Clara called as he turned to go. "I wanted to thank you again for everything. I know you said I don't owe you, but—" "You're right, you don't," he interrupted gently. "But if it eases your mind, you've already started repaying whatever debt you think you have. The men are happier tonight than I've seen them in a while. That's worth more than gold out here." He touched his hat and disappeared into the darkness, leaving Clara with a strange flutter in her chest. She tried to dismiss it as gratitude, but as she lay in her tent that night, listening to the distant lowing of cattle and the crackling of the dying fire, she wondered if it might be something more. For now, though, it was enough to be safe, to be respected, to be valued for her work. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as they moved the herd, but tonight, for the first time in 5 years, Clara May Whitlow fell asleep without fear. The stars wheeled overhead. The creek murmured its ancient song, and somewhere in the darkness, a lone cowboy stood watch, protecting not just the cattle but the unexpected gift that had come to his camp, a woman with courage enough to start again and grace enough to bring light to the shadows. The routine of camp life quickly became a comfort to Clara. Each morning she rose before dawn, stoking the fire and preparing coffee strong enough to wake the dead, as Cookie liked to say. The men would stumble from their bedrolls, drawn by the aroma, offering sleepy greetings before heading out to tend the herd. A week passed in this peaceful rhythm. Clara found herself looking forward to the evening gatherings when the men would share stories around the campfire. She learned that Frank had once been a prize fighter in San Francisco before seeking the quieter life of a cowboy. The Baxter brothers had grown up on a farm in Missouri, leaving after their parents died of fever. Miguel sang beautiful Spanish ballads that made even the toughest cowboys grow quiet with appreciation. And always, there was Levi, watchful and protective without being overbearing. He kept a respectful distance, but Clara often felt his eyes on her as she worked. When their gazes met, he would nod politely and return to his tasks. But something unspoken hummed in the air between them. It was on the 8th day that everything changed. Clara was kneading bread dough when Tom came riding hard into camp, his horse lathered with sweat. "Levi," he called out, his young voice cracking with urgency. "Riders coming from the east. 3 of them." Levi emerged from where he'd been checking supplies, his expression instantly alert. "How far?" "Maybe 2 miles. One of them." Tom glanced at Clara, his face troubled. "One of them looked like that fellow from town, the one who—" "Silas?" Clara breathed, her hand stilling in the dough. Levi's jaw tightened. "Tom, get the others. Tell them to stay with the herd, but be ready." He turned to Clara. "Go to your tent and stay there." "No," Clara said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. "I won't hide. Not anymore." Levi studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right, but stay close to the wagon." The men gathered quickly, their usual easy manner replaced by watchful readiness. Cookie appeared at Clara's side, a shotgun cradled in his arms. "Don't you worry none, miss," the old cook muttered. "Ain't nobody going to bother you while we're here." The riders appeared on the horizon, 3 dark shapes against the afternoon sky. As they drew closer, Clara's heart sank. It was indeed Silas. flanked by two rough-looking men she didn't recognize. Her uncle sat straighter in the saddle than she'd ever seen him, and she realized with a chill that he was stone-cold sober. They stopped just outside the camp, and Silas's eyes found Clara immediately. "There you are, girl," he called out. "Time to come home." "This is her home now," Levi said, stepping forward. His hand rested casually on his gun belt, but there was nothing casual about his stance. Silas spat tobacco juice into the dust. "Now see here, Carter, I've come to collect what's mine. The girl's my blood kin, my responsibility. The law's on my side." "What law?" Levi asked calmly. "The law that lets a man sell his niece for whiskey money." One of Silas's companions, a man with a pockmarked face and mean eyes, spoke up. "Way we heard it. You took her against her will. That's kidnapping in any court." Clara stepped out from behind Cookie, her chin raised. "That's a lie. I went willingly, mister. Carter saved me from being sold like a piece of property." Silas's face darkened. "You hold your tongue, girl. You're coming back with me, and that's final. I've got plans for you." "What kind of plans?" Levi's voice had gone dangerously quiet. The second stranger, younger but no less threatening, grinned unpleasantly. "Mr. Whitlow here owes some debts to important people. His niece could help settle them, if you understand my meaning." Clara felt sick. Cookie growled something under his breath, and she noticed the other cowboys had spread out, flanking their visitors. "I understand perfectly," Levi said, "and my answer is the same as it was in that saloon. Not while I live." Silas leaned forward in his saddle. "You willing to die for some girl you barely know? Cowboy." "Are you?" Levi countered. The tension stretched tight as a bowstring. Clara's heart pounded so hard she was sure everyone could hear it. Then Silas made his move not for his gun, but reaching into his saddlebag. Every cowboy's hand went to their weapon, but Silas merely pulled out a piece of paper. "I got the law on my side," he declared triumphantly. "This here's a writ from Judge Harlan in Elkhorn Ridge. Says the girl's my legal ward, and anyone keeping her from me is breaking the law." Levi didn't even glance at the paper. "Judge Harlan, who spends most of his time drunk in the silver dollar, that paper's not worth the ink it's written with." "Maybe not in your opinion," Silas said slyly, "but it'll hold up well enough to cause you trouble. Mr. Jacobson might not like hearing his foreman's been harboring a runaway. Might affect your position here." Clara saw Levi stiffen slightly. His job, his reputation, he was risking everything for her. "I'll go," she said suddenly. Every head turned to her. Levi's eyes narrowed. "Clara." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it stopped her heart for a moment, but she pressed on. "I won't have you all risking yourselves for me. I'll go." "Like hell." Cookie burst out. "Pardon my language, miss, but that ain't happening." "The lady's made her choice," Silas said quickly, triumph gleaming in his eyes. "No," Levi said flatly. "She hasn't." He finally looked at the paper in Silas's hand. "That writ's only good if Miss Whitlow is actually your ward. How old did you say you were?" "Miss Whitlow." Clara blinked, confused. 21, Levi corrected, his eyes holding hers meaningfully. "You told me 21. Remember?" Understanding dawned. At 21, she would be legally an adult, free of any guardianship. Clara's mind raced. "That's right," she said slowly. 21 last month. I sometimes forget, having no one to celebrate with." Silas's face went purple. "She's lying. She won't be 21 until next spring." "Can you prove that?" Levi asked mildly. "Do you have her birth records, church documents, because Miss Whitlow seems pretty certain of her age, and I'm inclined to believe her." The pockmarked man shifted restlessly. "This is getting complicated. Whitlow, you said it would be simple." "Shut up," Silas snarled. He glared at Clara. "You ungrateful little after everything I did for you." "Everything you did," Clara's fear transformed into anger. You mean keeping me in the root cellar, taking the money my parents left for my care and spending it on whiskey, trying to sell me to pay your gambling debts? Your parents didn't leave nothing, Silas shouted. I took you in out of the goodness of my heart. Liar, Clara said quietly. I was young, but not so young I don't remember. Papa had money saved. Money that disappeared the day after you took me in. Silas's hand moved toward his gun. The sound of 8 hammers cocking filled the air as every cowboy drew their weapon. I wouldn't, Levi said, his Colt appearing in his hand so fast Clara barely saw the movement. You're outgunned and outmatched. Take your friends and ride out. Don't come back. This ain't over, Silas hissed. You can't watch her forever. Carter, and when you slip up, if you threaten her again, Levi interrupted, or if I see you within 10 miles of this camp, we won't have words. We'll have lead. Do I make myself clear? For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Then Silas jerked his horse's head around. Come on, he snarled to his companions. Let's go. They rode off in a cloud of dust, but not before the younger man called back. This ain't finished, cowboy. Silas owes people who don't forget. The cowboys held their positions until the riders were specks in the distance. Only then did Levi holster his weapon. Double the watch tonight, he ordered. Tom, ride to the Jacobson ranch. Tell Mr. Jacobson's foreman what happened here. Make sure he knows the truth before any lies reach him. As the men dispersed, Clara found herself trembling. The confrontation had drained her of strength. She sank down on a crate near the chuck wagon. Levi approached slowly, as if she were a spooked horse. You all right? I'm sorry, she whispered. I've brought trouble to you all. No, he said firmly, crouching before her so they were eye level. Your uncle brought trouble. You've brought nothing but good to this camp. He paused. That was quick thinking, about your age. Clara managed a weak smile. You gave me the idea, though now I've lied to the law, such as it is. Sometimes the law and what's right aren't the same thing. His gray eyes were warm with something that made her breath catch. You were brave today. Not many would stand up to family like that. He's not family, Clara said fiercely. Family doesn't do what he tried to do. You and Cookie and the others, you've been more family to me in a week than he was in 5 years. Something shifted in Levi's expression. For a moment, she thought he might reach out to her, but he stood instead, the moment passing. Cookie, he called. I think Miss Clara could use some of that medicinal whiskey you keep hidden. I don't drink, Clara protested. Today you do, Cookie said, appearing with a small flask. Just a sip, for the nerves. The whiskey burned, but it stopped her trembling. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and purples, the camp slowly returned to normal. But Clara noticed the men staying closer, their eyes scanning the horizon more frequently. After supper, as she was cleaning the dishes, Frank approached. Miss Clara, we wanted you to know what Levi said goes for all of us. Anyone tries to bother you, they'll have to go through every man here. The others had gathered behind him, nodding their agreement. Even shy Tom looked fierce with determination. Thank you, Clara said, her eyes misting. Thank you all. Later, as the camp settled for the night, Clara found herself unable to sleep. She sat by the banked fire, wrapped in a blanket, watching the stars. She heard footsteps and wasn't surprised when Levi appeared. Can't sleep, he asked. Too much thinking, she admitted. He sat on a log across from her, maintaining that careful distance he always kept. He might come back. I know. With more men, maybe. I know that too. Clara pulled the blanket tighter. Maybe I should leave. Find somewhere else. Is that what you want? Clara looked at him. This man who'd stood between her and danger, asking for nothing in return. No, she said softly. It's not what I want. Then you stay. We'll handle whatever comes. He poked at the coals with a stick, sending up small sparks. "I meant what I said. Clara, not while I live." Her name on his lips sent warmth through her that had nothing to do with the fire. "Why?" she asked. "Why do you care what happens to me?" Levi was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, quietly, "Because everyone deserves a chance to choose their own path. Because strength isn't about how hard you can hit, but how much you can protect. Because—" He stopped, shaking his head. "Just because—" Clara wanted to push, to hear what he'd left unsaid, but she sensed the moment was too fragile. Instead, she said, "Thank you, Levi, for everything." He stood, preparing to leave, then paused. "You've got nothing to thank me for. Clara May Whitlow, you've earned your place here through your own merit. Don't let anyone, not your uncle, not anyone, tell you different." As he disappeared into the darkness, Clara sat watching the dying fire, her heart full of an emotion she wasn't quite ready to name. Somewhere out there, Silas was plotting his next move. But here, in this circle of firelight, surrounded by good men who'd sworn to protect her, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt like she was home. The days following Silas's visit passed with an undercurrent of tension. The men maintained their cheerful demeanor around Clara, but she noticed the way they kept their rifles close and how someone was always watching the horizon. Despite the worry, camp life continued its rhythm, and Clara threw herself into her work with renewed purpose. It was the fourth night after the confrontation when the storm rolled in. Clara had seen storms before, but nothing like this. The sky turned an ominous green-black, and the wind picked up with a vengeance, sending dust and debris whirling through the camp. "Storm's coming in fast," Levi shouted over the growing wind. "Secure everything, Tom. Help me with the horses." Clara rushed to help Cookie tie down the chuck wagon's supplies. The canvas covering the wagon whipped and snapped like an angry beast. Around them, Cowboy scrambled to secure their gear and calm the increasingly nervous cattle. "This is a bad one," Cookie yelled in her ear. "Get to your tent and stake it down good." But as Clara turned toward her tent, she saw it was already too late. The wind had torn one corner loose, and the whole structure was lifting like a sail. She ran toward it, desperate to save her few belongings, but a massive gust caught the tent and sent it tumbling across the prairie. "Clara!" Levi's voice cut through the howling wind. "Let it go!" Lightning split the sky, followed immediately by a crash of thunder that shook the ground. The rain came then, not in drops but in sheets, turning the earth to mud in seconds. Clara stood frozen, overwhelmed by the storm's fury. Then strong arms wrapped around her, pulling her toward the relative shelter of the chuck wagon. It was Levi, his hat lost to the wind, rain streaming down his face. "The supply tent!" he shouted. "It's reinforced!" Together they fought their way through the storm. The supply tent was larger and more solidly built than the others, its heavy canvas walls tied to deeply driven stakes. Several of the men had already taken shelter there, their faces illuminated by flashes of lightning. Inside, Clara found herself pressed against Levi's side as more cowboys crowded in. She was soaked through, shivering despite the warmth of bodies around her. Without thinking, Levi pulled her closer, sharing his heat. "Everyone accounted for," he called out. "All here except Miguel," Frank reported. "He's watching the herd with the Baxter brothers." The storm raged on, the tent walls bulging inward with each gust. Clara had never felt so small, so at the mercy of nature's power, but she also felt strangely safe, sheltered in this canvas refuge with these men who'd become her protectors. "Tell us a story, Cookie," Tom pleaded. "Something to take our minds off this." The old cook launched into a tall tale about a cowboy who'd lassoed a tornado, his voice rising and falling with the wind. Clara found herself relaxing slightly, though she remained acutely aware of Levi's presence beside her, his arms still protective around her shoulders. The storm seemed to last forever, but gradually the wind began to die and the thunder grew distant. When they finally emerged from the tent, The camp was a disaster. Gear was scattered everywhere. The campfire was a muddy pit, and Clara's tent was nowhere to be seen. "Well," Cookie said philosophically, "least we're all still breathing." The men set about restoring order with practiced efficiency. Clara helped where she could, but her heart sank as she surveyed the damage. Everything she owned, except what she'd been wearing, was gone. "Miss Clara," Tom called out, "I found this." He held up her mother's Bible. Muddy but intact. It had been in her tent, the only link to her past life. Clara took it with trembling hands, tears mixing with the rain still dripping from her hair. "Thank you," she whispered, as the sun began to break through the clouds, painting everything in golden light. Levi approached her. "I'm sorry about your belongings," he said quietly. "They were just things," Clara replied, clutching the Bible. "This is all that really mattered." "Cookie's setting up a spare tent for you. It's not much, but—" "It's fine," Clara interrupted. "I'm grateful for anything." Levi studied her for a moment. "You were scared during the storm." It wasn't a question, but Clara nodded anyway. "Terrified. I've never seen anything like that." "But you didn't panic. You kept your head." There was approval in his voice. "That's rare." "I felt safe," Clara admitted, then blushed at the admission. "With all of you. I mean, the tent, the shelter." Something flickered in Levi's eyes, but before he could respond, Frank called out urgently, "Levi, the Baxters are signaling from the herd." They could see the brothers waving from a distant rise. Levi grabbed his field glasses and studied them for a long moment. "Trouble," he said grimly. "Frank, Tom, with me. The rest of you stay here and keep watch." "What is it?" Clara asked. Levi hesitated, then said, "Riders, approaching the herd from the north. Could be nothing. Could be rustlers taking advantage of the storm." He looked at Cookie. "Keep Miss Clara close." They rode off at a gallop, leaving Clara with a growing sense of dread. The storm had scattered the cattle over a wider area, making them vulnerable. If rustlers were indeed approaching— "Don't fret, miss," Cookie said, but his own face was worried. "Levi knows his business." The waiting was agony. Clara tried to focus on preparing a meal from their scattered supplies, but her hands shook as she worked. Every few minutes, she found herself scanning the horizon. It was nearly an hour before the riders returned. Clara's relief at seeing Levi safe was so intense it made her knees weak, but her relief turned to alarm when she saw they had prisoners, two rough-looking men with their hands tied to their saddle horns. "Caught them trying to cut out some of our prime steers," Levi explained as he dismounted. "Storm provided good cover. They thought—" "What'll you do with them?" Cookie asked. "Take them to the sheriff in Willow Creek tomorrow. For tonight, we'll keep them under guard." Levi's expression was grim. "But here's the interesting part. One of them let slip they'd heard this outfit was short-handed, that we'd sent a rider away on urgent business." Clara's blood ran cold. Only one person would have known about Tom's ride to the Jacobson ranch, someone who'd been watching the camp. "Silas," she breathed. Levi nodded grimly. "These boys claim they don't know him, but the timing's too convenient. Your uncle's playing a dangerous game, using rustlers to cause trouble." Frank spat in disgust. "That's low, even for a snake like him." "What does he gain from it?" Clara asked, though she feared she knew the answer. "If we lose cattle, if there's trouble, Mr. Jacobson might blame me, might decide I'm not fit to run his outfit." Levi's jaw was tight. "Without this job, I couldn't protect you. You'd be vulnerable." The full scope of Silas's plan became clear. He was trying to destroy Levi's position, to remove the protection around her. Clara felt sick with guilt. "This is my fault," she said. "I've brought nothing but trouble." "Stop," Levi said firmly. "The only person at fault is your uncle, and we're not going to let him win." That evening, with the prisoners secured and under guard, The camp tried to return to some semblance of normalcy, but Clara could see the strain on everyone's faces. They were cowboys, not gunfighters or guards. This wasn't what they'd signed up for. After supper, she made a decision. Finding Levi checking on the horses, she approached with determined steps. "I need to leave," she said without preamble. "This has to stop before someone gets hurt." Levi didn't look up from the horse he was brushing. "Where would you go?" "I don't know. Somewhere far, California, maybe. Somewhere Silas can't find me." "And how would you get there? What would you do when you arrived?" His voice was calm, but Clara could hear an edge to it. "I'll figure it out. I can't let you all keep risking—" "You're not letting us do anything," Levi interrupted, finally turning to face her. "We're choosing to stand by you. That's what decent people do." "But why?" Clara burst out. "Why do you care so much? I'm nobody special. I'm just—" "You're wrong," Levi said quietly. In the fading light, his eyes were intense. "You are special. The way you faced every hardship, the kindness you show the men, the strength you don't even know you have. Do you know what Tom said after you helped him with his letters? He said it was like having a sister again. And Cookie hasn't complained about his back once since you took over the cooking." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "That doesn't mean you should risk your livelihood for me." "My livelihood." Levi took a step closer. "Clara, this job is just a job. But watching you find your courage, seeing you smile when you think no one's looking, hearing you hum while you work—" He stopped, running a hand through his hair in frustration. "I'm not good with words." "Try," Clara whispered, her heart pounding. "That first night in the saloon," he said slowly, "when I saw you standing there, terrified but trying to be brave, something in me just knew I couldn't let anything happen to you. It wasn't about being noble or heroic. It was like recognizing something I'd been looking for without knowing I was searching." The space between them had shrunk without either moving. Clara could see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, could smell the mixture of leather and soap that always surrounded him. "Levi," she breathed. "I know I'm just a cowboy," he continued. "I don't have much to offer, but I promise you this: I'll stand between you and any threat, whether it's your uncle or rustlers or another storm. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Because the thought of you being hurt or scared—" His voice roughened. "I can't abide it." Clara's tears spilled over then. "You foolish man," she said softly. "Don't you know you've already given me more than anyone else ever has? You've given me dignity, respect, a chance to be myself instead of someone's burden." "You were never a burden," Levi said fiercely. "Not to anyone worth knowing." Without conscious thought, Clara reached up and touched his cheek. He went very still, his eyes searching hers. The moment stretched between them, fragile as spun glass and just as beautiful. A shout from the camp shattered the spell. They stepped apart quickly as Tom came running. "Levi Cookie says come quick. One of the prisoners is asking to make a deal. Says he's got information about Whitlow's plans." Levi's expression hardened. "I'll be right there." He looked at Clara. "This conversation isn't over." As they walked back to camp, Clara's mind whirled. Levi's words echoed in her heart, warming places that had been cold for years. But the immediate danger remained. Her uncle was still out there, still plotting. The prisoner, a weasel-faced man named Hobbs, was eager to talk in exchange for leniency. According to him, Silas had bigger plans than just rustling cattle. He'd made promises to dangerous men, promises that involved Clara. "He owes Big Jack Thornton near $5,000, Hobbs said nervously. "Gambling debts? Thornton gave him 1 month to pay up, or—" He glanced at Clara and swallowed. "Or provide equivalent value." Clara felt the blood drain from her face. She knew Big Jack Thornton by reputation, a man who ran saloons and worse throughout Nevada, who traded in human misery. "When's the deadline?" Levi asked, his voice deadly quiet. "Week from now, maybe less. Whitlow's getting desperate. That's why he hired us, to cause chaos. Maybe grab the girl in the confusion." Cookie cursed colorfully. Frank cracked his knuckles. The other cowboys muttered among themselves, their expressions dark. "Well," Levi said finally, "sounds like we need to pay Mr. Whitlow a visit before he brings any more trouble to our door." "You can't," Clara protested. "It's too dangerous." Levi looked at her, and she saw not the gentle man who just bared his heart, but the steel underneath. "Some things," he said quietly, "are worth the danger." As the camp settled in for another watchful night, Clara lay in her borrowed tent, clutching her mother's Bible. The storm had passed, but she sensed another one approaching, this one man-made and potentially more destructive. But she was no longer the frightened girl who'd stood in that saloon a week ago. She'd found her strength, and more importantly, she'd found people willing to stand with her. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. In the distance, a coyote howled at the rising moon, and Clara whispered a prayer for safety, for courage, and for the quiet cowboy who'd shown her that love could grow even in the harshest ground. The night after the storm brought an unexpected calm. Clara couldn't sleep, her mind churning with worry and something else, a warmth that spread through her chest when she remembered Levi's words. She wrapped herself in a blanket and stepped outside her makeshift tent, drawn to the dying embers of the campfire. To her surprise, she wasn't alone. Miguel sat on a log, whittling a piece of wood by the faint light. "Can't sleep either, Miss Clara?" he asked softly. Clara sat down across from him. "Too much to think about." Miguel nodded, his knife making delicate cuts in the wood. "I know this feeling. When I left Mexico, coming north to find work, many nights I could not sleep. Too much worry, too much unknown." "Do you regret it, leaving home?" "Home is not always a place," Miguel said thoughtfully. "Sometimes home is where people treat you with respect, where your work has value. This camp, these men, this is more home than the village where I was born." Clara understood. The camp had become her home too, in just a few short weeks. "What are you making?" Miguel held up the wood, and Clara could see it was taking the shape of a small horse. "For my nephew, I send money home, but I want to send something made by my hands too." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Miguel carving and Clara watching the stars wheel overhead. Finally, Miguel spoke again. "Senor Levy, he is a good man, the best I have worked for." Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. "Yes, he is." "In my village, we have a saying, el amor no se encuentra, se construye. Love is not found, it is built, day by day, kindness by kindness." Miguel's dark eyes were knowing. "I see how he looks at you, Miss Clara, and how you look at him." Before Clara could respond, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them both tense, but it was only Tom. Returning from his watch, "All quiet out there," he reported, though he hesitated. "What is it?" Clara asked. "Thought I saw a light way off to the east, like a campfire, but it went out quick when I looked." Miguel frowned. "I will tell Levi in the morning." The next day dawned clear and bright, as if the storm had washed the world clean. But the mood in camp was subdued. Everyone knew that Silas's deadline was approaching, and with it, unknown danger. Levi gathered the men after breakfast. "I'm riding to Willow Creek to turn in our prisoners and talk to the sheriff about Silas Whitlow. Frank, you're in charge while I'm gone." "I'm coming with you," Clara said firmly. "No," Levi said immediately. "It's too dangerous." "Those men might have more information about my uncle's plans. I need to hear it." Clara lifted her chin. "And I'm tired of hiding." They locked eyes for a long moment. Finally, Levi sighed. "Cookie, can you spare her?" "Course I can. I managed before she came. Didn't I?" The old cook winked at Clara. "You go on. Miss Face this thing head on. An hour later, Clara found herself riding Buttercup alongside Levi, with the two prisoners and the Baxter brothers as guards. The journey to Willow Creek took most of the day, giving Clara time to gather her courage for what lay ahead. The sheriff in Willow Creek was a different breed from Judge Harlan, a former cavalry officer named Matthew Stone, who took his job seriously. He listened to their story with increasing concern. Silas Whitlow, he mused, stroking his gray mustache. I've heard the name. Owes money to half the territory, from what I gather. And Big Jack Thornton. He shook his head. That's bad business. Miss Whitlow. Thornton's got his fingers in everything from here to California. Can you help? Levi asked. I can lock up these rustlers, but Whitlow himself, unless he commits a crime in my jurisdiction, my hands are tied. Sheriff Stone looked sympathetic but firm. Best I can do is send word to the federal marshals about Thornton. They've been looking for an excuse to move against him. Clara felt her hopes sink. The law couldn't protect her from her uncle's schemes. As they prepared to leave, one of the prisoners, not Hobbs, but the other one, a younger man named Dale, called out from his cell. Miss, wait. Clara turned back reluctantly. I got a sister about your age, Dale said through the bars. What your uncle's trying to do ain't right. Hobbs didn't tell you everything. Levi stepped closer. What didn't he tell us? Dale glanced nervously at Hobbs in the next cell. Thornton's already sent men. They're supposed to meet Whitlow tomorrow night at Coyote Flats. That's why we were supposed to scatter your herd to draw you away from camp. Clara's blood ran cold. Coyote Flats was only 10 miles from their camp. How many men? Levi demanded. 6, maybe 7, professional guns, not like us. Thornton wants to make sure he gets his payment. Dale looked at Clara with something like pity. I'm sorry. Miss, I needed the money, but I didn't know it was going to be like this. They rode back toward camp in tense silence. As the sun began to set, Levi suddenly reined in his horse. What is it? Clara asked. Smoke, he said grimly, coming from the direction of camp. They spurred their horses into a gallop, fear lending speed to their mounts. But as they crested the final hill, Clara gasped in relief. The smoke was from the campfire, not anything more sinister. The camp looked peaceful in the evening light. Too peaceful. Where is everyone? James Baxter muttered. They rode in cautiously. Cookie emerged from behind the chuck wagon, rifle in hand, visibly relaxing when he saw them. Thank the Lord you're back, he said. We got company. Where? Levi asked, already reaching for his gun. Frank's got them pinned down by the creek. They rode in bold as brass about an hour ago, demanding we turn over Miss Clara. When Frank refused, they made threats and rode off toward the creek. Been exchanging shots since. Anyone hurt? Tom caught a graze on his arm. Nothing serious, but Levi... Cookie's face was grim. One of them was Whitlow, and he wasn't alone. Levi dismounted quickly. Robert, stay here with Miss Clara and Cookie. James, you're with me. No, Clara said, sliding off Buttercup. I'm done running and hiding. This is my fight. Clara, he's my uncle, she interrupted. My burden to face. I won't have good men dying because I was too cowardly to confront my own problems. Levi looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Clara's expression stopped him. You stay behind me at all times. If I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. They made their way toward the creek, using the gathering darkness as cover. As they drew closer, Clara could hear voices, her uncle's slurred tones among them. He'd been drinking again, probably for courage. They found Frank and the others sheltered behind a cluster of rocks, facing a similar formation across the shallow creek. In the dying light, Clara could see figures moving among the rocks on the other side. How many? Levi asked quietly. 5, maybe 6, Frank reported. They've got good cover, and they're in no hurry. Whitlow, Levi called out. This is Levi Carter. Let's talk. Nothing to talk about. Cowboy. Silas's voice came back. Send out my niece, and we'll be on our way. Not happening. Then we'll wait you out. Or maybe we'll just burn you out. How'd you like that? Clara couldn't stand it anymore. Before anyone could stop her. She stood up. Uncle Silas, she called. It's me you want. Let these men be... Clara, get down, Levi hissed, but she ignored him. There you are, girl, Silas called back. Come on over here. Time to pay your debts to family. I have no debts to you, Clara said, her voice carrying clearly in the still air. You stole from me, abused me, and now you want to sell me to pay for your own mistakes. What would my father say if he could see you now? Don't you mention him, Silas roared. My perfect brother, always looking down on me. Well, he's dead, ain't he? And I'm the one who survived. You survived by becoming everything he despised. Clara shot back. A drunk, a gambler, a man who would sell his own blood for whiskey money. A shot rang out, the bullet whining off the rocks near Clara. Levi yanked her down roughly. I said stay down, he growled, but his eyes were worried, not angry. Let me try something, Miguel said quietly. He'd appeared like a ghost, having circled around from the camp. These men with Whitlow, they are hired guns. See, they fight for money, not loyalty. Levi nodded slowly. What are you thinking? Miguel smiled. That perhaps they do not know the whole truth about their employer's situation. Before anyone could ask what he meant, Miguel called out in his accented English. Senoras, you who ride with Whitlow, do you know he owes Big Jack Thornton $5,000? Do you know Thornton's men are coming tomorrow to collect whatever Whitlow is paying you? Ask yourselves, will it be enough when Thornton learns you helped the man who owes him? There was silence from across the creek. Then Clara heard voices arguing in low tones. He's lying, Silas shouted. Don't listen to him. Is he? One of the other men called back. You said this was a simple job. Whitlow. Collect your runaway niece. You didn't say nothing about crossing Big Jack Thornton. I'm paying you, aren't I? Silas's voice was desperate now. Not enough to face Thornton's boys, another voice said. I'm out. Clara heard horses moving in the darkness, one by one. Silas's hired guns were abandoning him. Come back here, Silas screamed. You yellow-bellied cowards, I'll pay you double. With what money? Someone laughed. You're broke, Whitlow. Everyone knows it. Soon, the sound of retreating hoofbeats faded into the distance. Silas was alone. It's over, Uncle. Clara called out, Give up now, and Sheriff Stone might show mercy. Mercy, Silas laughed bitterly. Like the mercy I showed you taking you in when no one else would. You took me in for my father's money, Clara said quietly. We both know it. There was a long silence. Then Silas spoke again. His voice different older, more tired. You know what the funny thing is? Your father, he always said I'd amount to nothing. Said I was weak, worthless. And here I am, proving him right. It doesn't have to end this way, Clara said, surprised to find she meant it. Despite everything, some small part of her remembered the uncle who'd once, long ago, carved her a wooden doll for her birthday. Yes, it does, Silas said quietly. Then, louder, but I'll be damned if I go alone. Clara saw him rise from behind the rocks, saw the glint of metal in his hand. Everything seemed to slow down. Levi was already moving, throwing himself in front of her. The guns of half a dozen cowboys rose in response. The night exploded in gunfire. Clara felt Levi's weight bearing her to the ground, shielding her with his body. She heard shouts, more shots, then sudden silence. Is everyone all right? Frank's voice called out. Sound off, Levi ordered, still covering Clara. One by one, the cowboys reported in, all safe, though Clara could feel something warm and wet on her hand where it pressed against Levi's side. Levi, she whispered, you're hurt. Just a graze, he said, but his voice was tight with pain. Cookie appeared with a lantern, and in its light, Clara could see blood soaking through Levi's shirt. The bullet had caught him in the ribs more than a graze, but hopefully not fatal if treated quickly. "Let me up, you fool," she said, trying to push him off. "I need to look at that wound." "Is he?" Levi asked, still focused on the threat. Frank waded across the creek to check. He came back, shaking his head. "Whitlow's dead. Looks like he took 3 bullets. Stupid bastard basically committed suicide. Charging armed men like that." Clara felt a confusing mix of emotions, relief, sadness, guilt. Her uncle was dead, the man who'd made her life miserable for 5 years. But he was also her last blood kin, and now she was truly alone in the world. No, not alone, she realized as the cowboys gathered around, their faces concerned in the lamplight. She had a new family now, one forged by choice rather than blood. "Let's get you back to camp," she told Levi, slipping into caretaker mode to avoid dealing with her emotions. "That wound needs cleaning and bandaging." They made a strange procession back to Camp Levi, leaning on Frank, Clara hovering anxiously, the others keeping watch for any remaining threats. Cookie had hot water ready by the time they arrived, and Clara set about tending Levi's wound with steady hands that belied her inner turmoil. The bullet had passed through cleanly, missing anything vital. As Clara cleaned and bandaged the wound, Levi watched her face in the lamplight. "I'm sorry about your uncle," he said quietly. "Are you?" Clara asked, not looking up from her work. "He tried to kill us. He would have sold me to pay his debts. He was still your family." Clara's hand stilled. "No," she said softly. "You're my family. All of you, the ones who stood by me, protected me, gave me a chance when I had nothing." She met his eyes. "You got shot protecting me." "I'd do it again," Levi said simply. "I know." Clara resumed her bandaging, her touch gentle. "That's what frightens me. I don't want anyone else hurt because of me." "Hey," Tom called from across the camp. "Riders coming. Looks like... Is that Sheriff Stone?" Indeed it was. The sheriff had gathered a posse and ridden hard after getting word of trouble. He surveyed the scene grimly, taking statements from everyone. "Sounds like self-defense to me," he concluded. "Whitlow drew first. Multiple witnesses confirm it. I'll need you all to sign statements, but I don't see any charges being filed." As dawn broke over the camp, painting the sky in soft pastels, Clara found herself standing by the creek where the confrontation had occurred. The water burbled peacefully, as if nothing had happened. She sensed rather than heard Levi approach. He moved stiffly, favoring his wounded side, but his presence was as solid as ever. "What happens now?" Clara asked without turning around. "Now you're free," Levi said. "No uncle trying to control you, no debts hanging over your head. You can go anywhere, do anything." Clara turned to face him. "What if I don't want to go anywhere?" Levi's gray eyes searched hers. "The job at the Broken Spur Ranch is still available. It's good, steady work, safe." "Safe," Clara repeated. "A week ago. That's all I would have wanted, but now..." She took a breath, gathering her courage. "What if I want more than safe?" "Clara..." "You told me how you felt," she interrupted. "That night by the horses, you said you couldn't abide the thought of me being hurt or scared. Well, I can't abide the thought of leaving. Not the camp, not the men who've become my brothers, and not..." She stepped closer. "Not you." Levi's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch impossibly gentle for such a rough man. "I'm just a cowboy," he said softly. "I live a hard life, always moving, never settling. You deserve better than that." "I deserve," Clara said firmly, "to make my own choices. And I choose you, Levi Carter, if you'll have me." His answer was in the way he pulled her close, mindful of his injured side. The kiss was gentle, almost hesitant, as if he couldn't quite believe this was real. Clara poured all her gratitude, her hope, her growing love into that kiss, feeling him respond with equal emotion. When they finally parted, both breathing unsteadily, Clara saw Cookie grinning at them from the camp, Tom and Miguel beside him. The whole outfit was watching with approval. "About time," Frank called out. "We were starting to think we'd have to lock you two in a supply tent to get you to admit your feelings." Clara laughed, the sound bright and free in the morning air. For the first time in 5 years, maybe for the first time in her life, she felt truly, completely happy. "So," Levi said, his arm still around her waist, "I guess this means you're staying." "Try to get rid of me," Clara challenged. "Never," he promised, and sealed it with another kiss as the sun climbed higher, blessing the camp with golden light and the promise of better days ahead. The weeks following Silas's death passed in a blur of healing and adjustment. Levi's wound mended slowly but surely under Clara's careful attention, though he chafed at being restricted from his usual duties. The men stepped up without complaint, Frank taking on extra responsibilities while their boss recovered. Clara found herself settling into camp life with a new sense of belonging. No longer was she just the cook who'd been rescued from a dire situation. She was truly part of the outfit, her opinion sought and valued. The men had taken to calling her Miss Clara with genuine affection, and she responded by making their meals with extra care, mending their clothes without being asked, and continuing to help with their letters home. It was on a particularly fine morning, with the autumn air crisp and clear, that Levi approached her as she was preparing breakfast. He moved without the stiffness that had marked his movements for weeks, finally healed enough to resume full duties. "Clara," he said, and something in his tone made her look up from the biscuit dough. "We need to talk about your future." Her heart sank, despite their shared kiss, despite the obvious feelings between them. They'd carefully avoided discussing what came next. The cattle drive would end soon. The men would disperse for winter, and decisions would have to be made. "I know," she said quietly, wiping her floury hands on her apron. "Cookie mentioned the Broken Spur Ranch again yesterday. They're still looking for a cook." Levi frowned. "Is that what you want, to go to Broken Spur?" Clara met his eyes steadily. "What I want hasn't changed since that morning by the creek, but wanting and having are two different things, aren't they?" Before Levi could respond, Tom came riding in hard, his horse lathered with sweat. "Levi, we got company coming. Fancy carriage, about 2 miles out." Levi's hand went automatically to his gun. After the recent troubles, they were all wary of strangers. "How many?" "Just a driver and 1 passenger. Far as I could tell, doesn't look like trouble, but..." Tom shrugged. "Best be safe. Frank, Miguel, with me. The rest of you stay here and keep watch." Levi glanced at Clara. "This conversation isn't over." They rode out to meet the carriage, Clara watching anxiously from camp. To everyone's surprise, the vehicle that approached was indeed fancy, polished black with brass fittings, pulled by a matched pair of grays. It looked absurdly out of place on the rough prairie. The carriage stopped just outside camp, and a well-dressed elderly gentleman stepped out, aided by his driver. He was perhaps 70 years old, with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. His clothes spoke of money, not the flashy kind that gamblers favored, but the quiet wealth of established society. "I'm looking for Miss Clara May Whitlow," the gentleman announced in a cultured voice that carried traces of the East. Clara stepped forward, suddenly conscious of her worn dress and flour-dusted apron. "I'm Clara Whitlow." The gentleman's face softened into a smile. "My dear child, I'm your great-uncle, Harrison Whitlow, your grandfather's brother." Clara felt the world tilt. I don't understand. My father never mentioned..." "No, I don't suppose he would have," Harrison sighed. "There was a falling out in the family many years ago. Your grandfather and I parted on bad terms, and by the time I was ready to make amends, he had passed. I lost track of your father until recently." when I hired investigators to find any remaining family. How did you find me? Clara asked, still reeling. The investigators tracked you to your Uncle Silas's residence in Elkhorn Ridge. When they found you'd left under difficult circumstances, they followed the trail here. Harrison's expression grew somber. I heard about Silas. I'm sorry for your loss, despite the circumstances. Clara didn't know what to say. Another relative, appearing from nowhere, but this one radiated respectability and kindness rather than threat. Perhaps we could sit and talk, Harrison suggested. I've come a long way from San Francisco. Cookie quickly arranged seats by the chuck wagon, and Clara found herself serving coffee to a relative she'd never known existed. The Cowboys maintained a respectful distance but stayed alert. Levi positioned where he could watch everything. I'll be direct, my dear, Harrison said after the pleasantries were observed. I'm an old man with no children of my own. I've built a considerable business in shipping and trade, and I have no one to leave it to. When I learned I had a great niece, I had to find you. You want me to, come to San Francisco? Clara felt overwhelmed. I want to offer you the life you should have had, Harrison said gently. Education, society, comfort. The Whitlow name carries weight in San Francisco. You'd want for nothing. Clara glanced at Levi, whose face had gone carefully blank. The other Cowboys were studiously avoiding looking at her, but she could sense their dismay. That's very generous, Clara managed. It's not generosity, it's family duty, one that should have been fulfilled long ago. Harrison set down his coffee cup. I have a large home on Nob Hill, fully staffed. You'd have your own suite of rooms, a wardrobe befitting a lady of status, and I'd arrange for tutors to fill any gaps in your education. In time, you'd be introduced to society, meet suitable young men from good families. I need time to think, Clara interrupted, her mind spinning. Of course. I've taken rooms in Willow Creek. Take all the time you need. Harrison stood, then paused. I know this must be overwhelming, but Clara, you're a Whitlow. You deserve better than... He gestured vaguely at the camp. After he left, the camp was unusually quiet. Clara went mechanically about her duties, aware of the Cowboys' careful attempts to act normal. Only Levi maintained his distance, checking on the herd longer than necessary. That evening, Clara found herself sitting with Cookie, who was uncharacteristically subdued. Quite an opportunity, the old cook said finally. San Francisco society. Fine dresses and fancy parties. Everything a young lady should want. Is it? Clara asked. Cookie sighed. I had a daughter once, lost her and her mother to scarlet fever when she was just 10, but I used to dream about giving her pretty things, seeing her married to some prosperous merchant. He poked at the fire. Course, she probably would have hated it. She was happiest in overalls, helping me with the horses. Cookie, you should go, he said firmly. This life, it's hard, uncertain. You've seen the worst of it already. Your great-uncle's offering you security, comfort, a future. Clara was saved from responding by Levi's return. He dismounted stiffly, his recently healed wound clearly bothering him after the long day. You should rest, Clara said automatically. I'm fine. His tone was brusque, distant. Have you decided? Have I? Levi, I just learned about this today. How can I decide my entire future in a few hours? Seems pretty clear to me, he said, not meeting her eyes. Rich uncle, comfortable life, everything proper and respectable. Why would you stay here? The unfairness of it stung. You're the one who told me about the broken spur job. You're the one who keeps talking about what I deserve. Maybe I should ask why I would stay. Levi finally looked at her, and the pain in his eyes made her breath catch. You're right. I've got no claim on you. No right to ask you to choose a life of hardship over what he's offering. You have every right, Clara said fiercely. But you have to ask. You have to say the words. They stared at each other across the fire, the weight of unspoken feelings heavy between them. Around them, the Cowboys had made themselves scarce. Recognizing a private moment, "I can't," Levi said finally, his voice rough. "I can't ask you to give up that kind of life for this, for me. It wouldn't be fair." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. Since when has fairness had anything to do with it? She stood abruptly and walked away, needing space to think. The night was clear, stars brilliant overhead. She found herself at the spot by the creek where she and Levi had first kissed, the water gurgling peacefully in the darkness. What did she want? The question echoed in her mind. A month ago, she would have jumped at Harrison's offer without hesitation. Safety, security, respectability, everything she'd dreamed of during those long years in Silas's house. But that was before she'd found a different kind of family, before she'd discovered her own strength, before she'd fallen in love with a quiet cowboy who'd risk everything to protect her, but couldn't ask her to stay. "Miss Clara," Tom's voice came tentatively from the darkness. "Sorry to bother you, but, well, the boys wanted me to give you this." He handed her a folded piece of paper. By the moonlight. She could see it was covered in different handwriting, some neat, some barely legible. "What is this?" "We all wrote something, in case you decide to go, so you'd remember us." Clara's tears spilled over as she read the messages. Frank thanking her for making him feel civilized again. Miguel's poetic words about finding family far from home. The Baxter brothers' simple but heartfelt gratitude. Tom's touching note about how she'd made him feel less homesick. Even Cookie had added his piece. Gruff words that barely concealed deep affection. At the bottom, in Levi's careful script, "Whatever path you choose, you've already changed our lives for the better. Be happy, that's all any of us want for you." Clara clutched the paper to her chest, decision crystallizing in her heart. She knew what she had to do. The next morning, she was up before dawn, preparing an extra special breakfast. The men ate with unusual quiet, clearly believing it might be their last meal together. When Harrison's carriage appeared on the horizon, the mood grew even more somber. Clara had changed into her best dress, still simple by society standards, but clean and pressed. She'd packed her few belongings, including her mother's Bible and the precious letter from the Cowboys. Harrison stepped from the carriage with a pleased smile. "I'm so glad you've decided to come, my dear. You won't regret this, I promise." "Uncle Harrison," Clara said clearly, "I'm grateful for your offer, more grateful than you can know. To learn I have family, good family, means the world to me." Then, "But I can't come with you, not now." She saw his face fall and hurried on. "I've found something here I never expected. A purpose, a family of choice. A life that may be hard but is truly mine." Harrison's gaze swept over the Cowboys, lingering on Levi. "I see. And does this decision have anything to do with that tall gentleman who's been glaring at me since I arrived?" "Despite everything," Clara smiled. "Among other things. My dear child, passion fades. Hardship wears on the soul. In 10 years, I'll have lived those years as myself, making my own choices." Clara took his hands. "But I hope we can still be family, that you'll write to me, perhaps visit sometimes. I want to know you, Uncle Harrison. I just can't be who you want me to be." Harrison studied her for a long moment, then sighed. "You have your father's stubborn streak, and your grandfather's. Come to that." A small smile tugged at his lips. "Very well, but my offer stands. Always, if you change your mind. If you need anything at all, you need only send word." "Thank you." Harrison reached into his coat and pulled out a leather folder. "I suspected you might say something like this. You're a Whitlow, after all, and we're nothing if not independent." He handed her the folder. "Consider this my blessing." Inside was a bank draft for a substantial sum, and several documents. Clara gasped. "Uncle, I can't—" It's a fraction of what would have been yours as my heir. Enough to ensure you're never dependent on anyone, that you always have choices. He glanced at Levi again. A woman should have her own resources, don't you think? Clara hugged him impulsively, feeling his surprise before he returned the embrace. Thank you, she whispered. Be happy, he said softly. And do right. I find myself curious to hear about this life you've chosen. After Harrison's carriage disappeared into the distance, Clara turned back to find the entire outfit watching her with varying degrees of shock and joy. You stayed, Tom breathed. You really stayed? Of course I stayed. Clara said, This is my home. The cowboys erupted in celebration, but Clara only had eyes for Levi, who stood apart, his expression unreadable. You turned down a fortune, he said quietly when she approached. Society, comfort, everything a lady should want. I turned down a life that wasn't mine, Clara corrected. Levi, I need to know. If I had nothing, no money from my uncle, no options at all, would you want me to stay? I wanted you to stay from the moment you smiled at Tom over his mother's letter, Levi said roughly. But wanting and asking, Clara stopped him with a kiss, pouring all her frustration and love into it, around them. The cowboys hooted and hollered, but she didn't care. When they parted, both breathless, Levi rested his forehead against hers. Marry me, he said simply. I can't offer you much, but what I have is yours. My heart's been yours since that night in the saloon. Yes, Clara said, laughing and crying at once. Though you should know, I'm not exactly penniless anymore. She showed him the bank draft, watching his eyes widen. We could buy our own spread, she said tentatively. Build something together. Levi's slow smile was like sunrise. Partners. In everything, Clara confirmed, as the camp erupted in celebration around them. Cookie producing a hidden bottle of good whiskey for toasts. Clara felt the last piece of her new life click into place. She'd found her family, her purpose, her home, and none of it was what she'd expected when she'd stood terrified in that saloon just weeks ago. Sometimes, she thought as Levi's arms came around her, the best life was the one you chose for yourself, not the one chosen for you. And as the sun climbed higher over the prairie, blessing their joy with golden light, Clara May Whitlow knew she'd chosen well. The Broken Spur Ranch spread out before them like a painting, its whitewashed buildings nestled in a valley where cottonwoods grew tall along a year-round stream. Clara rode beside Levi, her heart lifting at the sight of what would be their new beginning. Behind them, Cookie drove the chuck wagon, having agreed to stay on as their cook and advisor. It's perfect, Clara breathed, taking in the modest but well-maintained ranch house, the solid barn, the good grazing land stretching toward distant mountains. It needs work, Levi said practically, but she could see the satisfaction in his eyes. That roof won't last another winter, and the fences need mending, but the bones are good. They'd bought the Broken Spur from the elderly couple who'd offered Clara work, the Hutchinsons, who were ready to retire to their daughter's home in Denver. The price had been fair, leaving them with enough of Uncle Harrison's gift to make improvements and buy starter cattle. As they rode into the yard, Mrs. Hutchinson emerged from the house, her weathered face creasing into a smile. Welcome, oh, it does my heart good to see young folks taking over. This place needs life in it again. Over the next hours, the Hutchinsons showed them around, explaining the quirks of the water pump, the best grazing rotations, which neighbors could be trusted, and which to watch. Clara absorbed it all, her mind already planning where she'd plant a kitchen garden, how she'd arrange the house to make it truly theirs. The hands' quarters are sound, Mr. Hutchinson explained, gesturing to a long, low building near the barn. You'll be wanting to hire men soon. I expect... Already have some in mind, Levi said, and Clara smiled, knowing he was thinking of Tom and Miguel, Frank and the Baxter brothers. The outfit had scattered after the cattle drive, but they'd all promised to reunite come spring. That first night in their new home, Clara stood in the kitchen that was now hers, running her hands over the worn but clean counters. It was 3 times the size of Cookie's camp setup, with a proper stove and even a sink with a pump. Having second thoughts, Levi asked from the doorway, still hesitant about entering what he clearly considered her domain. "Never," Clara said firmly. "Though I do wonder what my mother would think, seeing me here." "I think she'd be proud," Levi said quietly. "You've made your own way, chosen your own path. That takes courage." Clara crossed to him, marveling that she could do so freely now, that she had the right to take his hand, to lean into his strength. "We've done it together." They were married 2 weeks later in the small church in Willow Creek, with Cookie giving Clara away and Sheriff Stone serving as Levi's best man. Clara wore a simple but pretty dress she'd made herself, with the lace sent by Uncle Harrison, who couldn't attend but sent his warm wishes and a surprisingly generous wedding gift. The ceremony was small but joyful. Mrs. Hester from Elkhorn Ridge had made the journey, dabbing at her eyes as Clara and Levi exchanged vows. Tom had ridden 2 days to be there, grinning like a proud younger brother. Even some of their new neighbors attended, curious about the young couple taking over the broken spur. "Do you, Clara May Whitlow, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Reverend Davies asked, his voice carrying in the small church. "I do," Clara said clearly, her eyes never leaving Levi's. "And do you, Levi Samuel Carter, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do," Levi said, his voice thick with emotion. "Then, by the power vested in me, I pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss your bride." The kiss was tender, full of promise, and Clara barely heard the cheers of their small congregation. When they parted, Levi whispered, "Hello, Mrs. Carter." "Hello, Mr. Carter," she whispered back, and felt her heart might burst with happiness. The reception was held at the ranch, tables set up in the yard, lanterns strung between the trees. Clara had cooked for days, with Cookie's help, and the tables groaned under the weight of food. Their neighbors brought dishes too, and Clara began to understand that she was now part of a larger community, a network of ranchers and families who looked out for each other. As the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant colors, the party grew livelier. Someone brought out a fiddle, and soon couples were dancing on the packed earth of the yard. Clara found herself passed from partner to partner, Sheriff Stone surprisingly light on his feet, Tom adorably clumsy, Cookie making her laugh with his exaggerated formality. But always her eyes sought Levi, who stood at the edge of the festivities, watching her with a small smile. When she finally escaped the dancers and went to him, he pulled her close. "Happy?" he asked. "So happy I could burst," Clara admitted. "A year ago, I never could have imagined this." "Neither could I," Levi said. "I thought I'd spend my life drifting from outfit to outfit, never settling, never finding home. Then you walked into that saloon, scared but brave, and everything changed." They swayed together in the shadows beyond the lantern light, their own private dance. In the distance, Clara could hear Cookie regaling the guests with the story of how Levi had faced down Silas in the silver dollar, the tale already growing in the telling. "No regrets?" Levi asked. "You could be in San Francisco now, attending the opera, wearing silk gowns." Clara silenced him with a kiss. "I'm exactly where I want to be, where I choose to be." As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Clara and Levi stood on their porch waving goodbye. The ranch was theirs now, their future spread before them like the star-filled sky above. "I've been thinking," Clara said as they finally went inside, "about hiring hands for the spring." "Already have that planned out. Do you?" Levi teased. "Well, we'll need Tom, of course. He's young but eager to learn, and Miguel, he's the best with horses I've ever seen. Frank for his experience. the Baxter brothers for their hard work. "That's 5 hands for a ranch this size. Ambitious." "We'll grow into it," Clara said confidently. "I've been corresponding with Uncle Harrison about the cattle market in San Francisco. He has connections that could help us get better prices. And Mrs. Hutchinson mentioned that the neighboring ranch might be for sale next year." Levi laughed, pulling her close. "I married a businesswoman." "You married a woman with plans," Clara corrected. "And the first plan is to make this ranch successful enough to support our family." "Our family," Levi repeated, his voice soft. "I like the sound of that." Winter came early that year, blanketing the ranch in snow by November. But Clara had never been happier, waking each morning in the warm circle of Levi's arms, spending her days making their house a home. She started a correspondence with Uncle Harrison, their letters flying back and forth with news and advice. He was delighted by her happiness, even if he didn't quite understand her choice. Cookie had taken over the old foreman's cabin, declaring himself too set in his ways to winter anywhere else. He was a godsend, helping Levi with ranch work and keeping Clara company during the long evenings. They'd sit by the fire, Cookie telling stories while Clara sewed or knitted, Levi working on harness repairs. "You two remind me of my Mary and me," Cookie said one evening. "Same way of looking at each other, like the rest of the world don't exist." "How long were you married?" Clara asked gently. 12 years. Not nearly long enough?" Cookie stared into the fire. "But I had those years, and they were good ones. That's more than many folks get." One particularly cold night, a blizzard howling outside, they were surprised by a knock at the door. Levi answered it cautiously, gun in hand, to find Tom standing on the porch, nearly frozen. "Tom!" Clara exclaimed, rushing to pull him inside. "What are you doing here?" "Couldn't find work in town," the boy said through chattering teeth. "Remembered you said I'd always have a place." "And you do," Levi said firmly. "Cookie, get him some hot coffee. Clara, blankets." They settled Tom by the fire, and as he thawed out, the story emerged. Work had been scarce, and younger hands were always the first let go. He'd spent his last coins on supplies and set out for the Broken Spur, nearly dying in the storm. "You should have written," Clara scolded gently. "We would have sent money for the stage." Tom ducked his head. "Didn't want to be a burden." "Family's never a burden," Levi said, and Clara saw Tom's eyes fill with tears at the word family. From that night on, Tom became the first official hand of the Broken Spur, living in the bunkhouse and working alongside Levi to prepare for spring. His presence brought new life to the ranch, and Clara loved hearing his laughter mixing with Cookie's gruff humor at mealtimes. As winter slowly gave way to spring, more familiar faces appeared. Miguel arrived with the first thaw, grinning broadly. "I hear the Broken Spur is hiring," he said, "and that the food is even better than on the trail." Frank came next, then the Baxter brothers, just as Clara had predicted. By April, the ranch was fully staffed, the bunkhouse lively with voices and laughter. Clara cooked for them all, her kitchen the heart of the operation. One evening, as Clara served supper in the big kitchen that had become their gathering place, she looked around at the faces Cookie arguing good-naturedly with Frank about the best way to break a horse, Tom helping Miguel with English words, the Baxter brothers planning the next day's work, Levi at the head of the table watching it all with quiet satisfaction. "Penny for your thoughts," Levi said later, as they sat on the porch watching the sun set behind the mountains. "I was thinking about that night in the saloon," Clara said. "How terrified I was, how certain my life was over." She took his hand. "I never imagined that the worst night of my life would lead to all this." "Not while I live," Levi quoted softly. "I meant it then, but I had no idea what those words would bring." "A wife who keeps you busy with her grand plans," Clara teased. "A partner," Levi corrected. "A home, a future I never dared dream of." From the bunkhouse came the sound of Tom's harmonica. a tune Clara recognized as one of Miguel's Mexican ballads. Cookie's distinctive laugh rumbled through the evening air. Their little corner of Nevada was alive with contentment. "I love you, Levi Carter," Clara said simply. "And I love you, Clara Carter," he replied, more than words can say, as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. Clara leaned against her husband's shoulder, her hand resting on her still flat stomach where their first child grew. She hadn't told him yet, savoring the secret a little longer. But soon, their family would grow again, adding to the life they were building together. The Broken Spur Ranch stood solid beneath the vast Nevada sky, no longer broken, but whole, filled with purpose and promise. And in the kitchen window, a lamp burned bright, a beacon of home for all who needed it, just as Levi had once been a beacon for a frightened girl who'd found her courage in the shadow of his protection. "Not while I live," Clara whispered to herself, understanding finally that those words were more than a promise of protection. They were a vow of dedication, a commitment to stand together against whatever came. And as she sat with Levi in the peaceful evening, surrounded by the family they'd chosen and the life they'd built, Clara knew that nothing, not storm, nor trouble, nor time itself, could break what they'd forged together. The lamp burned on, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called to its mate. Life on the ranch continued, simple and hard and perfect in its imperfection. And Clara May Whitlow Carter, who'd once had nothing but fear and sorrow, now had everything that truly mattered: love, purpose, and the freedom to choose her own path beneath the endless western sky. The Autumn Harvest Festival at Willow Creek was in full swing when Clara felt the first flutter of movement in her belly. She paused in serving punch at the church booth, her hand going instinctively to her rounded stomach. 5 months along now, and the baby was making its presence known. "You all right, honey?" Mrs. Patterson, the mayor's wife, asked with knowing eyes. "Perfect," Clara smiled, pouring another cup. "Just someone saying hello." The festival had become a highlight of their year at Broken Spur. Tables laden with preserves, pies, and handicrafts lined the main street. Children ran between the booths, their laughter bright in the crisp air. Clara's contribution, 3 dozen jars of apple butter and 2 quilts she'd sewn during the quiet winter evenings, had sold within the first hour. "Clara!" Tom's voice called out. He jogged up, his face flushed with excitement. "You've got to see this. Levi's about to win the horseshoe tournament." Clara followed Tom to where a crowd had gathered. Levi stood at the throwing line, his concentration absolute. Since their marriage 2 years ago, he'd become more involved in community events, his natural reserve thawing under Clara's gentle encouragement and the town's warm acceptance. He threw, the horseshoe spinning perfectly before landing with a satisfying clang around the stake. The crowd erupted in cheers, and Levi's face broke into one of his rare full smiles as he spotted Clara. "Show off," she teased when he came to collect his prize, a new bridle donated by the general store. "Had to impress my wife somehow," he replied, his hand finding hers. "How are you feeling?" "Wonderful. The baby's dancing today." She placed his hand where she'd felt the movement, and was rewarded by his expression of wonder as their child moved again. "Every time," he said softly. "It still amazes me." They were interrupted by a commotion near the church steps. Clara turned to see a young woman, travel-stained and exhausted, holding a small child. The woman swayed on her feet, and several people rushed to steady her. Clara didn't hesitate. "Bring her to our booth," she called. "Tom, fetch Dr. Morrison." The woman was helped to a chair, clutching her child, a boy of perhaps 3 years, protectively. Up close, Clara could see she was younger than first appeared, maybe 22, with the kind of desperate look Clara remembered all too well. "I'm sorry," the woman whispered. "I don't mean to cause trouble. We've been walking so long." "Hush now," Clara said gently, pressing a cup of water into her hands. "Drink this, What's your name? Ruth. Ruth McKenna. This is my boy, James. Doctor? Morrison arrived, quickly checking both mother and child. Exhaustion and hunger, mainly, he pronounced. Nothing rest and good food won't cure. Then that's easily fixed, Clara said decisively. They'll come home with us. She saw Levi nod approvingly. It wasn't the first time they'd taken in someone who needed help. Word had somehow spread that the Broken Spur was a place of refuge, and Clara was proud of that reputation. Back at the ranch, with Ruth and little James fed and settled in the spare room, Clara finally heard their story. Ruth's husband had died in a mining accident 6 months ago, unable to pay rent. They'd been evicted. She'd heard there might be work in California and had been trying to get there on foot. With a 3-year-old, Cookie asked, his tone mixing disbelief and respect. What else could I do? Ruth's chin lifted with a pride Clara recognized. I won't beg, and I won't compromise myself. I can work. I'm strong. That you are. Clara agreed. What kind of work can you do? Anything. Cooking, cleaning, sewing. I helped my mother take in laundry before I married. I'm not afraid of hard work. Clara exchanged glances with Levi. They'd been discussing hiring help for the house, especially with the baby coming. Their success with the ranch meant they could afford it, and Clara was finding it harder to keep up with everything as her pregnancy progressed. How would you feel about staying on here? Clara asked. We need help with the house, and there's plenty of room. James could grow up with our little one. Ruth's eyes filled with tears. You don't even know me. Why would you? Because someone once took a chance on me when I needed it most, Clara said simply, and it changed my life. That night, as they prepared for bed, Levi pulled Clara close. You sure about this, taking on a woman and child we don't know? Were you sure about me that night in the saloon? Clara countered. That was different. He paused, then chuckled. No, I suppose it wasn't. Instinct, both times. Good instinct, Clara agreed. Ruth reminds me of myself 2 years ago. Scared but trying to be strong. She deserves a chance. And if she brings trouble, a woman on her own might have people looking for her. Clara thought of her uncle, of the fear she'd carried. Then we'll handle it, just like we did before. Ruth proved to be a godsend. Within a week, she'd taken over many of the household tasks Clara found increasingly difficult. She was quiet but efficient. And little James brought new life to the ranch. The Cowboys adopted him immediately, Tom carving him wooden horses while Miguel taught him Spanish counting songs. One afternoon, Clara found Ruth crying quietly while hanging laundry. What's wrong? Clara asked, alarmed. Nothing's wrong, Ruth said, wiping her eyes. Everything's right. That's why I'm crying. James laughed today, really laughed, for the first time since his father died. I'd started to think I'd never hear it again. Clara understood. Joy after sorrow could be overwhelming. This is your home now, she said firmly. For as long as you want it. As November arrived with its chill winds, the ranch prepared for winter. The hands worked to ensure the cattle were moved to sheltered pastures. Hay was stored, and buildings were secure. Clara supervised the laying in of supplies, her experience from the previous winter serving her well. It was during one of these preparation days that unexpected visitors arrived. Clara was in the kitchen with Ruth, teaching her to make the sourdough biscuits Cookie favored, when Tom burst in. Mrs. Clara, there's a fancy carriage coming up the road. Clara's heart leaped. She knew only one person who traveled in such style. Sure enough, Uncle Harrison stepped out, helped by his driver, followed by a well-dressed younger man Clara didn't recognize. Uncle Harrison, Clara hurried out as quickly as her condition allowed. What a wonderful surprise. My dear Clara, Harrison embraced her carefully, then held her at arm's length. Look at you blooming with health and happiness. The ranch life clearly agrees with you. Come in, please. You must be exhausted from the journey. Clara ushered them inside, calling for Levi. Over tea and fresh biscuits, Harrison explained his visit. I wanted to see for myself how you were doing. Your letters paint such a picture, but I had to witness it firsthand. He gestured to his companion. This is my associate, Mr. David Sterling. He handles my cattle contracts in San Francisco. The business talk that followed went over Clara's head, but she could see Levi's interest sharpen as Sterling discussed prices and contracts. By the evening's end, they'd negotiated a deal that would guarantee good prices for broken spur beef in San Francisco markets. You've done well, Clara, Harrison said privately as they walked in the garden she'd planted. This is a real home you've built. With Levi, Clara corrected. We built it together. Yes, I can see that. He's a good man. I wasn't sure at first, but watching you together. Harrison smiled. Your parents would be proud. Do you think so? Clara asked wistfully. I know so. You've taken the Whitlow independence and tempered it with compassion. This ranch isn't just a business, it's a haven. I heard in town about the families you've helped, the hands you've given second chances to. Everyone deserves a chance to prove themselves. Clara said, I got mine. It's only right to pass it on. Harrison stayed 3 days, and his presence brought unexpected benefits. His obvious respect for Clara and Levi elevated their standing with some of the more established ranchers who'd been slow to accept the young couple. By the time he left, promising to return after the baby was born, the Broken Spur's position in the community was firmly cemented. December brought snow and quiet days. Clara, now heavily pregnant, spent her time teaching Ruth and James, preparing baby clothes, and maintaining her correspondence. The hands had pooled their money to buy wood and were building a cradle in the barn, thinking it was a secret. One evening, as snow fell softly outside, they all gathered in the main house for supper, a tradition Clara had insisted on for Sunday nights. The big kitchen was warm and full of laughter as Cookie told one of his tall tales. Clara looked around the table, Levi at her right, his hand often finding hers, Cookie holding court at the other end, Tom, no longer the shy boy but a confident young man, Miguel teaching James a song, the Baxter brothers arguing good-naturedly about something, Frank whittling a toy for the baby, Ruth smiling as she hadn't when she first arrived. You're doing it again, Levi murmured in her ear. What? That look, like you're trying to memorize everything. I am, Clara admitted. I want to remember this. All of it. The way the lamplight catches on the windows, the sound of Cookie's voice, the smell of the stew and fresh bread, this feeling of being exactly where I'm meant to be. Levi squeezed her hand. We've come a long way from that saloon in Elkhorn Ridge. Not while I live, Clara said softly, the words that had started everything. You kept that promise. We both did, Levi corrected. We protected each other. Later that night, as the ranch settled into sleep, Clara stood at their bedroom window watching the snow fall. Her hand rested on her belly, feeling the baby move. In a few weeks, their child would be born into this world they'd created, a world of love and safety, of chosen family and second chances. Can't sleep, Levi asked, coming up behind her, wrapping his arms around her. Just thinking about how different my life would be if you hadn't stood up that night. I'd probably be... She shuddered, not wanting to voice the possibilities. But I did stand up, and you stood with me every step since then. He rested his chin on her head. No use thinking about what might have been. This is what is. And it's perfect, Clara said. Not easy, but perfect. Wait until this little one arrives. Levi chuckled. Then we'll see how perfect you think things are at 3 a.m. Clara laughed, turning in his arms. Even then, especially then, because it will be our child, crying in our home, surrounded by people who love them. What could be more perfect than that? As if in agreement, The baby kicked strongly. They stood together in the window, watching their land sleep under its blanket of snow, complete in their contentment. The journey from that terrifying night in the saloon to this moment of absolute peace had been unexpected, sometimes difficult, but ultimately transformative. Clara thought of the scared girl she'd been, dependent on the whims of a drunken uncle. That girl could never have imagined standing here, mistress of her own home, partner in a thriving ranch, surrounded by love and preparing to welcome a child into a stable. Joy-filled life. "Thank you," she whispered to Levi. "For what?" "For seeing something in me worth saving, for giving me the chance to discover who I could be." "You always had it in you," Levi said firmly. "I just made sure you had the space to let it grow." The snow continued to fall, blanketing the world in pristine white. Inside the Broken Spur ranch house, all was warm and secure. The lamp in the kitchen window burned steadily, a beacon in the night, just as Levi had once been Clara's beacon. Now it welcomed all who needed shelter, warmth, or simply a place to belong. And in the circle of her husband's arms, with their child moving beneath her heart and their chosen family sleeping peacefully around them, Clara knew that sometimes the most beautiful endings were really just beginnings in disguise. Dawn was breaking over the Nevada mountains when the first pains came. Clara gripped the porch railing, breathing through the contraction as she'd seen other women do. The baby wasn't due for another week, but apparently, their child had other plans. "Levi," she called, trying to keep her voice calm. He was in the barn with Tom, checking on a sick calf. Ruth appeared in the doorway, took one look at Clara's face, and understood immediately. "I'll fetch him," she said, then called back over her shoulder. "And don't you dare try to walk to bed by yourself." Within minutes, the ranch was in controlled chaos. Levi burst from the barn, his face white with worry. Cookie sent Tom racing to town for Dr. Morrison while Miguel rode to fetch Mrs. Patterson, who delivered half the babies in the county. "I'm fine," Clara assured Levi as he helped her to their bedroom. "Women have been doing this since the beginning of time." "Not my woman," Levi muttered, his hands trembling slightly as he helped her settle into bed. Ruth proved invaluable. Having assisted at her younger siblings' births, she kept Clara comfortable and Levi from wearing a hole in the floor with his pacing. By the time Mrs. Patterson arrived, Clara was deep in the rhythm of labor, focusing on bringing their child safely into the world. "You're doing beautifully, dear," Mrs. Patterson said after examining her. "This little one's eager to meet you." The hours that followed blurred together pain and breathing. Levi's hand in hers, Ruth's quiet encouragement, Mrs. Patterson's calm instructions. Dr. Morrison arrived as the sun reached its peak, but by then, Clara was pushing, driven by instinct older than thought. "One more, Clara," Mrs. Patterson urged. "Your baby's almost here." With a final effort that seemed to pull strength from the very earth beneath the ranch, Clara brought their child into the world. A lusty cry filled the room, and suddenly everything else faded away. "A daughter, Dr. Morrison announced, cleaning the baby gently. "A fine, healthy daughter." Clara reached for her baby with shaking arms, tears streaming down her face as the small weight settled against her chest. The infant's cries quieted immediately, as if recognizing her mother's heartbeat. "She's perfect," Levi breathed, his rough fingertip tracing the baby's tiny cheek with infinite gentleness. "Look at her, Clara. We made her." "What will you name her?" Ruth asked softly, her own eyes wet. Clara looked at Levi, seeing her answer in his smile. They'd discussed names for months, but holding their daughter made the choice clear. "Hope," Clara said. "Hope Catherine Carter, for the future, and for the past that brought us here." Catherine had been Clara's mother's name, a fact she'd shared with Levi during one of their late-night talks about family and loss. Now it would live on in their daughter, a bridge between generations. The news spread quickly through the ranch. Soon, boots could be heard on the porch as the hands gathered, eager for word. Mrs. Patterson finally took pity on them, opening the bedroom door. "You can come see her, but quietly," she warned. "And boots off." They filed in like schoolboys, hats in hand, faces scrubbed clean. Tom's eyes were wide with wonder. "She's so small," he whispered. "You were that small once," Cookie told him gruffly, though his own eyes were suspiciously bright. "We all were." Miguel had brought a small wooden cross, carved with delicate flowers. "For blessing," he explained shyly. "In my village, we hang above the baby's bed for protection." Frank presented a tiny pair of moccasins, soft as butter. "Made them myself," he said proudly. "First pair of anything that small I've ever done." The Baxter brothers had pooled their money for a silver rattle from town, and even little James contributed, toddling forward with a somewhat worse-for-wear stuffed rabbit that Ruth had made him. "For baby," he announced solemnly, placing it next to Hope. Clara was overwhelmed by the outpouring of love for their daughter. These rough cowboys, who faced down storms and stampedes without flinching, were reduced to gentle giants by one tiny girl. As the days passed, the ranch adapted to its newest resident. Hope proved to have her father's calm temperament and her mother's determination, nursing vigorously and sleeping peacefully between feedings. The hands took turns sitting with Clara when Levi was working, entertaining her with stories and ranch gossip. It was Tom who was on duty the afternoon Silas's son arrived. Clara was nursing Hope in the parlor when she heard horses approaching. Through the window, she saw two riders, one clearly a lawman by his badge, the other a young man who looked unsettlingly familiar. "Mrs. Carter," the lawman called from the porch. "Sheriff Mills from Carson City. Might we have a word?" Levi appeared from somewhere, Frank and Miguel flanking him. Clara could see the tension in their stances, the memories of past trouble still fresh. "What's this about, Sheriff?" Levi asked. "This here's William Whitlow," the sheriff explained. "He's looking for his cousin. Heard she might be in these parts." Clara's heart sank. She'd never known Silas had a son, but looking at William, the resemblance was unmistakable. She handed Hope to Ruth and went to the door, Levi immediately moving to stand beside her. "I'm Clara Carter," she said steadily. "Born Clara Whitlow. What do you want?" William Whitlow was perhaps 25, with Silas's dark hair but steadier eyes. He held his hat nervously, looking nothing like the threat they'd all been preparing for. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm sorry to trouble you. I only just learned about what happened with my father. I've been back east at school. My mother left him when I was young, took me with her. I hadn't seen him in years." Clara studied him, looking for deception, but found only genuine discomfort. "Then why are you here?" "To apologize," William said simply. "When I heard what he'd tried to do, I was horrified. My mother always said he wasn't a bad man when she met him, just weak. But weakness can lead to terrible things when it's fed by drink and desperation." "Yes," Clara agreed quietly. "It can." William reached into his coat, and every hand on the ranch twitched toward their weapons, but he only pulled out a leather folder. "I've been settling his affairs," he continued. "There wasn't much, but I found this. It's the deed to your parents' homestead. He never sold it, just let it sit empty all these years. I thought you should have it." Clara took the deed with trembling hands, her childhood home, the place where she'd been happy before the fire. She'd assumed Silas had sold it immediately for drink money. "I don't want it," she said firmly, surprising everyone. "That life is gone. This is my home now." "Then sell it," William suggested. "Use the money for your daughter. Consider it a small repayment for what my father took from you." "You don't owe me anything," Clara said. "You weren't responsible for his actions." No, but family debts should be honored by family, even if we can't make them right. William glanced around the ranch, taking in the well-maintained buildings, the obvious prosperity. You've done well for yourself, ma'am. My father was a fool not to see your worth. From inside came Hope's cry, and Clara's body responded instinctively to her daughter's need. If you'll excuse me. Of course. I won't trouble you further. William turned to go, then paused. I'm glad you found happiness. Cousin Clara, truly glad. After they left, Clara sat feeding Hope while Levi examined the deed. Your parents' land is valuable now, he said. The railroad's going through that area. This could be worth a considerable sum. Then we'll put it away for Hope, Clara decided. For her education, her future. Let something good come from all that pain. That evening, the ranch was subdued, everyone processing the unexpected visit. Clara found herself standing in Hope's room, the one she and Levi had prepared with such care, watching their daughter sleep. Regrets? Levi asked from the doorway. No, Clara said firmly. That deed represents a past I can't return to. My parents are gone. The girl who lived in that house is gone too. I'm not her anymore. Who are you then? Levi asked, though his smile said he already knew. I'm Hope's mother, your wife, the woman who helps run the Broken Spur Ranch. I'm someone who chooses her family instead of being stuck with them. She moved into his arms. I'm exactly who I want to be. Winter gave way to spring, with Hope thriving in the center of their unusual family. She had a dozen devoted guardians, each competing to make her smile. Cookie sang old lullabies in his gravelly voice. Tom played peekaboo endlessly. Miguel told her stories in musical Spanish. Even the reserved Frank could be found reading to her from whatever was handy, including, memorably, a guide to cattle diseases that seemed to fascinate her. Ruth's son James appointed himself Hope's protector, always wanting to know where Baby was and bringing her treasures, interesting rocks, wildflowers, once a very confused toad that had to be quickly relocated. On a warm May morning, Clara stood on the porch watching Levi work with a new horse, Hope contentedly nursing in her arms. The ranch spread before them, green and thriving. Cattle grazed in the distance. The garden Ruth helped her plant was already showing sprouts. We did it, she murmured to her daughter. We built something good from something terrible. Hope released her grip and gazed up at her mother with eyes that were settling into Levi's gray. She waved one tiny fist, as if agreeing. Mama, Mama. James came running, Ruth chasing behind. Cookie says, come quick, something's happening. Clara hurried to the kitchen to find Cookie bent over a letter, tears streaming down his weathered face. It's from my sister's girl, he managed. The one I ain't seen in 15 years. She found me, wants to come visit with her children. That's wonderful, Clara exclaimed. Of course she must come. We'll make room. Cookie looked up at her. This young woman who'd become the daughter he'd never had. Just like that, you'll welcome strangers into your home. They're not strangers, Clara said firmly. They're your family, which makes them ours. That's how the Broken Spur works. As she spoke the words, Clara realized how true they'd become. The ranch wasn't just a business or even a home. It was a haven for anyone who needed it, a place where broken things became whole. Just as she had. That night, as was their custom when the weather was fine, the entire household gathered for supper in the yard. Tables were pulled together, lanterns hung from the trees. Clara sat with Hope in her arms, watching their extended family enjoy the meal and each other's company. You're doing it again, Levi said, sitting beside her. My memorizing look. Your satisfied look, he corrected, like a cat that got the cream. I feel like I got more than cream, Clara said. I got the whole dairy. Levi laughed, that rich sound she'd worked so hard to hear more often. Have I told you today that I love you? Only 3 times, Clara teased. You're slipping. Can't have that. He leaned in to kiss her. Hope cooing between them as if offering her own opinion. As the evening deepened and the stars emerged, Clara reflected on the journey that had brought them here. From that terrifying night in the saloon to this moment of perfect contentment. Every step had been worth it. The fear, the uncertainty, even the pain, all of it had led to this life she couldn't have imagined. "Not while I live," she whispered, the words that had saved her becoming a prayer of gratitude. "What was that?" Levi asked. "Just thinking about promises kept," Clara said, shifting hope to her other arm, "and futures bright with possibility." Around them, their family continued their evening cookie, arguing with Frank about horses, Tom showing Miguel something in a book, Ruth helping James catch fireflies, the Baxter brothers planning tomorrow's work. It was loud and chaotic and absolutely perfect. The Broken Spur Ranch stood strong beneath the vast Nevada sky, no longer a place of mere survival, but one of abundant life. And at its heart sat Clara May Carter, once lost but now found, once alone but now surrounded by love. Living proof that sometimes the most beautiful lives grow from the harshest ground. As hope yawned and settled into sleep, Clara knew that her daughter would grow up knowing only safety and love, surrounded by this chosen family who would protect her as fiercely as they'd once protected Clara. The cycle of rescue and redemption would continue, the ranch remaining a beacon for anyone who needed it. "Ready to go in?" Levi asked as the air grew cool. "In a moment," Clara said. "I want to watch just a little longer." So they sat together, their daughter between them, watching their family, their life, their future spread out before them like the stars above, countless, brilliant, and full of wonder. Spring came early to Nevada that year, painting the desert in unexpected colors. Clara stood in her garden, now expanded to 3 times its original size, watching Hope toddle between the rows of young vegetables. At nearly 2 years old, their daughter had inherited her father's steady nature and her mother's determination, approaching each new discovery with focused intensity. "Mama, look!" Hope held up a earthworm with the pride of someone who'd found treasure. "That's wonderful. Sweetheart, the worms help our plants grow strong." Clara knelt beside her daughter, her hands automatically going to her rounded belly where their second child grew. "Should we put him back in the soil so he can do his work?" As Hope carefully returned the worm to its home, Clara heard the sound of many horses approaching. She looked up to see a sight that made her heart swell, their entire crew returning from the spring cattle drive, successful by the looks of their faces. Levi was at the head, sitting tall in his saddle despite the weariness of weeks on the trail. His eyes found hers immediately, and the smile that crossed his face erased years from his features. Behind him rode the familiar faces: Tom, now trail boss in his own right; Miguel, still the best hand with horses; the Baxter brothers, inseparable as ever; Frank, grayer but no less capable. "Papa!" Hope shrieked, running as fast as her little legs could carry her. Levi swung down from his horse and caught her up, lifting her high in the air. "There's my girl. Have you been good for your mama?" "I helped with the plants," Hope announced. "And I learned more letters, A, B, C, D, E." "That's my smart girl." Levi's eyes met Clara's over their daughter's head, full of love and questions about her condition. "We're fine," Clara said, answering the unspoken concern. "Both of us." The homecoming was always Clara's favorite time, the men tired but satisfied, full of stories from the trail, eager for home cooking and comfortable beds. The bunkhouse filled with laughter and good-natured ribbing as they settled back in. That evening's supper was a celebration. Clara and Ruth had been cooking all day in anticipation, and the table groaned under the weight of roasted beef, fresh bread, early vegetables from the garden, and 3 kinds of pie. Cookie presided over it all like a benevolent king, his niece Mary and her children having arrived the month before to become permanent additions to their extended family. "Tell us about the drive," Clara urged as they ate. Tom's letters were frustratingly brief. "Hey, I told you the important stuff," Tom protested, making everyone laugh. "The boy did good," Levi said, pride clear in his voice. Handled a river crossing that would have challenged men twice his age. We didn't lose a single head. Tom flushed with pleasure. At 21, he'd grown into a capable leader, though he still looked to Levi and Clara as the parents he'd found too late to save him from years of struggle. And Miguel saved us from what could have been a bad situation with rustlers, Frank added. Spotted their camp from 2 miles off. We were able to go around without any confrontation. The stories continued storms weathered, challenges overcome, the good price they'd gotten in Abilene thanks to Uncle Harrison's connections. Clara listened with one ear while watching Hope charm everyone at the table, already learning the power of a sweet smile and good manners. She's going to be a heartbreaker, Ruth observed. Her own son James, now a sturdy 5-year-old who followed the Cowboys like a shadow. Over my dead body? Levi muttered, making everyone laugh again. Later that night, after Hope was asleep and the ranch had settled into quiet, Clara and Levi sat on their porch in the rocking chairs Cookie had made them. The stars were brilliant overhead, unmarred by clouds. I missed this, Levi said quietly. Missed you, both of you. We missed you too. Hope asked for Papa every night. Clara reached over to take his hand. The baby's been active. I think it's a boy this time. He kicks like he's trying to break out early. A son? Levi's voice was wondering. Someone to carry on the ranch. Or another daughter to help run it. Clara reminded him. Either way, they'll have choices. That's what we're building here, a place where our children can choose their own paths. Speaking of choices, Levi said, I got a letter in Abilene, from the Cattlemen's Association. They want to nominate me for the board. Clara sat up straighter. The Cattlemen's Association was powerful, influential. Board members shaped policy for the entire territory. Levi, that's wonderful. It would mean traveling more, meetings in Carson City, sometimes as far as Sacramento. He squeezed her hand. I wanted to discuss it with you first. Of course you should accept, Clara said firmly. You've earned this recognition, and think of the good you could do making sure small ranchers have a voice, protecting the rights of men like our hands. You wouldn't mind managing things here while I'm gone. Clara laughed. Levi Carter, I've been managing things here since the day we bought this place. We're partners. Remember, we each do what we do best. He pulled her carefully into his lap, mindful of her condition. How did I get so lucky? It wasn't luck, Clara said, resting her head on his shoulder. It was choice. We chose each other, chose this life. Every day, we keep choosing it. The weeks that followed were full of preparation. Levi accepted the board position, and Clara took on more of the ranch management. She'd learned so much in their 3 years here how to read the weather, judge cattle, negotiate prices. The hands respected her decisions, knowing she'd earned her authority through hard work and fair dealing. It was high summer when their son arrived, coming fast and fierce like a thunderstorm. This time, Clara was ready, with Mrs. Patterson and Ruth attending her. Levi paced outside like any expectant father. The tough trail boss reduced to anxious muttering. A boy, Mrs. Patterson announced, strong as a young bull. They named him Samuel Harrison Carter Samuel for Cookie, whose given name they'd only recently learned, and Harrison for the uncle whose generosity had helped make their dreams possible. Young Sam had his mother's dark hair and what promised to be his father's steady gray eyes. Hope was fascinated by her baby brother, wanting to help with everything. She brought him toys he was too young for, sang him songs that were mostly made up, and announced to everyone that her baby was the best baby in the world. As autumn approached, the ranch buzzed with activity. They'd expanded again, purchasing the neighboring property when it came up for sale. Tom had taken over as full foreman, allowing Levi to focus on his association duties and the business side of ranching. One evening, Clara was in her study, a room Levi had insisted on adding to the house, working on the account books, when she heard a commotion outside. Through the window, she saw a wagon approaching, filled with what looked like furniture and household goods. A woman drove while 3 children of varying ages sat in the back. Clara went out to meet them, Sam on her hip and Hope clutching her skirts. The woman looked exhausted, desperate, and achingly familiar. It was the look Clara had once worn herself. "Please," the woman said before Clara could speak. "I'm looking for work. Any work. I can cook, clean, sew. My husband died last winter, and we lost our farm. I heard the broken spur sometimes helps people." Clara didn't hesitate. "Come inside. You look like you could use a meal and rest. We'll sort out the details later." The woman, Sarah Morrison, nearly wept with relief. As Clara helped her children down from the wagon, she caught Levi watching from the barn, a small smile on his face. He nodded approval, knowing as well as she did that their ranch would make room for one more family. That night, with the Morrison family settled in what had been storage rooms but would soon be proper quarters, Clara found herself walking through their home, taking stock of all they'd built. The house had grown from its original 4 rooms to 12, not counting the addition they'd built for Ruth and James. The bunkhouse had been expanded twice. A second barn stood where there had been only grassland. But more than the physical growth, it was the life within these walls that amazed her. In the kitchen, Cookie and Mary prepared food for what had become a small community. In the main room, Tom was teaching James and the Morrison children a card game while Miguel played his guitar. Ruth was showing Sarah around, explaining how the household ran. Somewhere outside, the Baxter brothers and Frank were likely still working, their dedication never wavering. "Surveying your kingdom," Levi asked, coming up behind her. "Our kingdom," Clara corrected, leaning back against him. "Though I'd hardly call it that. More like a family," Levi finished. "The biggest, strangest family in Nevada." "The best family," Clara said firmly. As if to underscore the point, Hope came running down the hall in her nightgown, chased by Mary's eldest boy. Their laughter filled the space, bringing smiles to every adult face. "Bedtime, young lady," Clara said, scooping up her daughter. "Story first," Hope bargained. "Papa tells the best stories." "One story," Levi agreed, taking her from Clara. "But then straight to sleep." As they tucked their children into bed, Sam in his cradle, Hope in her small bed with the quilt Clara had made, Clara felt the deep contentment that had become her constant companion. This life, built on the foundation of that terrifying night in the saloon, had exceeded her wildest dreams. Later, as she and Levi prepared for bed themselves, he pulled out a letter. "This came today. I wasn't sure when to show you." Clara recognized the handwriting immediately. "Uncle Harrison," but as she read, her eyes widened. He was offering to make them full partners in his shipping business, specifically the cattle transport side. It would mean significant expansion, maybe even an office in San Francisco to manage. "What do you think?" Levi asked carefully. Clara set the letter aside and took her husband's hands. "I think we have everything we need right here. Money's nice, opportunities are wonderful, but this," she gestured around them, encompassing their room, their home, their land, their people. "This is what matters." Levi smiled, that slow, warm smile she'd fallen in love with. "That's what I hoped you'd say, though maybe we could consider it for the children's sake options for their future. We'll give them something better than money," Clara said. "We'll give them roots and wings both, the knowledge that they come from a place where love matters more than profit, where family is chosen as much as born, where a person's worth isn't measured in dollars, but in kindness." "When did you get so wise?" Levi asked, pulling her close. "Somewhere between that saloon and this moment." Clara laughed. "With a lot of help along the way." As they settled into bed, Clara could hear the sounds of their ranch settling for the night, a horse nickering in the barn, the creak of the windmill, distant laughter from the bunkhouse where someone was probably losing at poker to Cookie. These sounds were her lullaby now, as comforting as her mother's voice had once been. "I love you, Levi Carter," she said into the darkness. "I love you too, Clara Carter," he replied. "More than that first day, more than yesterday, probably less than tomorrow." "That doesn't make sense," Clara pointed out, smiling. "Love doesn't have to make sense," Levi said. "It just has to be true." And it was true, Clara reflected. True as the stars wheeling overhead. True as the land beneath them. True as the promise once made and kept, "Not while I live." From that promise had grown this life unexpected, sometimes difficult, but always, always worth it. The scared girl in the saloon was gone, transformed into a woman of strength and purpose. But she lived on in Clara's determination to help others as she had been helped, to offer hope where there was despair, to build family from the broken pieces of many lives. As sleep began to claim her, Clara sent up a prayer of gratitude for the cowboy who'd stood up when everyone else looked away, for the rough men who'd become brothers, for the chances given and taken. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to extend grace to others. But tonight, safe in her husband's arms, in the home they'd built, surrounded by the family they'd chosen, Clara May Whitlow Carter was exactly where she belonged. The circle was complete, but ever expanding, ready to embrace whoever might need the sanctuary of the broken spur. And somewhere in the Nevada night, a lamp burned in the window, just as one had burned for her, welcoming the lost, the lonely, and the desperate to a place where broken things were made whole, and the promise of protection, "Not while I live," extended to all who needed it. The story had come full circle, but the ending was really just another beginning, another chance to choose love over fear, community over isolation, hope over despair. And that choice, made daily, would continue as long as the broken spur stood a testament to the power of one moment of courage to change everything. Not while I live. 4 words that built a dynasty of love. 4 words that saved a life and created countless others. 4 words that would echo through generations. A reminder that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with someone simply saying no to injustice and yes to hope. Thank you so much for listening to this story of Clara and Levi's journey. I'd love to hear where you're enjoying this tale from, whether you're listening during your commute, relaxing at home, or perhaps even out on the range yourself. Please share your thoughts in the comments below. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 for more tales of courage, love, and redemption from the American frontier. Please like this video and hit the hype button to help more people discover these stories that remind us of the power of standing up for what's right. Until next time, partners, keep riding toward your own sunrise.